Recording in progress.
You're all set.
Why isn't that?
Just wait until it kicks in.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a minute.
Bob? It's taking more than a minute. Liz, would you mind just...
Why do they lock that?
I don't know, I think they're afraid we're gonna raid them.
No, it started.
It started.
Yeah, that's just on the delay.
It's on a delay.
Big delay.
For safety purposes, we may need to get out that way someday.
Here we go.
I agree.
Good evening. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021, as extended by Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, the Yarmouth Select Board will hold a public meeting on Tuesday, March 4, 2025, at 6 p.m. in the hearing room, Yarmouth Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth, Mass. 02664. The public is welcome to attend either in person or via the alternatives public access provided on the town website. If you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let me start off with, are there any announcements tonight?
I wanted to remind the public about the Cape and Vineyard Solar Program. There's a solar loan that Joyce brought up at the last town meeting, but it's an incredibly great opportunity if you're thinking at all of solar power. The rate is 2.75%, and it is going fast. So contact the Cape Light Compact to get your solar loan and get your solar on your house.
And if we could call up the chair of the Finance Committee?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Richard Simon, Chair of the Finance Committee. As required, I am opening calling our meeting to order. We do not have a quorum, but we will still have a meeting in order.
Thank you.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Did we do public comments? I just missed them.
No, he wanted to do his announcement. I'm coming to public comments right now. Okay, public comments. Anyone in the room? Anyone online? Vita, I see your hand up. Good evening. You have to unmute, Vita.
I know, but it didn't come on my screen until just now.
There you
You can hear me now, I assume, right?
I can hear you now, Vita.
All righty. I just wanted to double check and make sure that, as indicated in the agenda, the public will be able to participate in discussion on the school district budgets. Is that still on?
Yes, you're going to be able to participate in the section slated for the Finance Committee and capital budget.
It's all
No, no, I'm
public. It's all
talking, I'm
public.
talking about school district
Yes,
budgets.
it's a public hearing.
It's a public.
So,
You can hold, Vito. I'll be happy to call on you at the time.
yeah, that's what I just wanted to be sure. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other public comments? Okay, moving on then, we will be opening the public hearing on budget and capital plan. We're going to be starting with the Finance Committee. So if our chair could come back up to the table.
I have to have my partner in crime here.
Yes, absolutely.
Partner in dime.
They bring up the screen. I'd like to wish everybody a good evening. As I said before, I'm Richard Simon, the Chair of your Finance Committee. I'll be kicking off tonight's four-part public hearing on the town's operating budget and capital plans as required by our town charter, section 7.5. The Finance Committee derives its powers from Massachusetts General Laws, chapters 39, section 16, chapter 40, section 6, chapter 41, sections 59 and 60, and chapter 70, section 6. The Select Board and the Finance Committee separately review and report on all articles that appropriate funds at town meeting. The appointed Yarmouth Finance Committee does not set policies, goals, or priorities. That's the purview of the Select Board. We do not implement these policies and priority, but we rely on the town administrator and their capable team to make all of those tough decisions. About half of our town's budget is determined by the elected regional school committee, which again sets the district's policies, goals, and priorities, and they in turn rely on Superintendent Smith and his leadership team to determine the best way to educate about 3,000 pupils and provide funding for another 550 students who attend local charter schools, other district schools as part of school choice, and specialized schools dedicated to serving the students with the most complex needs. Finally, neither the Select Board School Committee nor Finance Committee approves the budget. This power belongs to the voters at town meeting, so please come. However, the Finance Committee does spend more than 2 months thoroughly reviewing the town administrator's proposed budget to advise the town meeting participants accordingly. So if you move to the table that shows the work of the committee, this table overviews the work of the committee. Our meetings are open to the public, either in person or online. Most of the meetings are scheduled on Wednesday, starting at 6 o'clock. The agenda for each meeting and the packet of materials review are posted in advance and can be found on the Agenda Center in the lower left hand of the town's website. Video recordings and minutes of past meetings are also available on the town's website for public review. And as you can see, during the last couple of months, we've been meeting with every single town department, as well as schools. And at our February 26th meeting, we voted 7-0 to recommend 25 of the 34 articles, right? And for those who are online, the warrant can be found in the packet for tonight's meeting on pages 131 to 154. 2 of the articles, Articles 7 and 31, do not require our recommendation. And at our March 12th meeting, we will consider the remaining 7 articles, Article 1, 8, 9, 19, 26, 33, and 34, where the details had not been finalized prior to our February 26th meeting. So I'd like to summarize. Yarmouth's proposed budget for the fiscal year 2026 is balanced, and its financial affairs are being very well managed by the town officials. So I'm going to go a little bit off script. So the substance of what we reviewed really sort of goes into 3 overarching categories: financial stability, workforce development, and infrastructure development. Financially stable municipalities generate revenues sufficient to pay for the services the residents use, while also preparing to weather rainy days. Prepared communities can soften the blow of unanticipated revenue losses or expense increases, and that reduces the need to cut services or raise taxes. Ensuring Yarmouth's financial stability overhangs every Finance Committee deliberation. Certainly, attending to the appropriateness of expenditures and the adequacy of revenues is an important focus, but two is the size of the reserves and stabilization funds relative to our liabilities. So the committee continues its intentional focus on deploying free cash to fund items in the capital improvement plan and other non-recurring expenses, or allocating a regular portion of free cash to stabilization and reserve funds. Workforce development is the second overarching issue. The variety of services Yarmouth provides demands committed, skilled employees. Recruiting, training, and then retaining those employees has challenged all Cape employers for at least 5 years. The cost of living here, especially housing, continues to exceed the increases in wages and other compensation. The town presents an otherwise level-funded budget, but we are honoring a commitment that began in fiscal year 2025 to raise the staffing levels of the fire department in 2 increments, and that requires a property tax override for FY26 of $845,476, about a 1% increase. For more than a decade, the fire department experts have recommended such staff increases. Resident safety depends on a team of firefighters and EMTs being available for dispatch when the calls arrive. Last year at town meeting, we agreed to address this staffing by catching up with hiring and equipping 8 recruits over 2 years, 4 last year and 4 more this year. Stretching the staff too thin puts public safety at risk, and expected growth in residential population and assisted living facilities is likely to increase future demand for ambulance services. Recruitment and retention have challenged every other town department in recent years. The town is engaged in a comprehensive evaluation of salary grades and grade steps, and at fall town meeting, we approved a limited employment bonus pilot program as an interim measure. The final overarching category holding the Finance Committee's focus is our natural resources and capital stock. Like our workforce, Yarmouth must develop and maintain these resources to adequately serve its residents. Responsible municipalities seek to preserve and develop and maintain resources and capital. Yarmouth is a good steward for our lands and beaches, our bays and estuaries, and our rivers and our ponds for the benefit of this and future generations. We are practicing good stewardship when we acquire and maintain the technology and equipment that employees use to deliver high-quality services that the residents expect and rely on. We must be prepared to replace these productivity enhancers before obsolescence or excessive maintenance costs outweigh their usefulness. Because of these considerations, it may be preferable in certain cases to lease items rather than purchase them. So now we get to the, we're good. So town enterprises, and that's what that slide is, this one back up. Town enterprises like water, septic, and golf have significant projects, capital projects ongoing, which they fund from the revenues raised within their enterprise. But our largest undertaking is the wastewater project. The plan to finance the $207 million cost of Phase 1 conservatively spreads out the repayment obligations across several revenue sources, including state subsidies, betterments, increased property valuations, and other earmarked revenues, plus user fees when the system comes online. And we must continue to fund predictable maintenance or the replacement, if necessary, of the town's roadways, equipment, vehicles, structures, including the schools, police and fire stations, libraries, the senior center, recreation sites, and other facilities. The Finance Committee acknowledges the Finance Director for her substantial contributions to the professionalism of our deliberations, starting with the significantly improved format of the FY26 budget document, which is much thinner than last year's, and publishing the town's inaugural audited fiscal year 2024 annual comprehensive financial report. This enhanced format of the annual audit is available for the public and investors several months in advance of the prior basic financial statement. The public can access both of these documents, the budget document as well as the annual comprehensive financial report, as well as the capital budget details on the town's website by simply going to the government menu on our website and clicking on the budget link. So, long-winded way of saying this budget process that we have just wrapped up, we are in excellent shape right now. We have already previewed much of the material in previous meetings. We starting with the capital budget review that we had back in December. We've already seen the fire department, wastewater, and schools come here in previous sessions. So again, I'm just sort of, if there's any questions, I could answer them now, but again, I think it's probably perhaps more useful if we just let people move on.
Liz, any questions?
No, I'm looking forward to the capital budget committee and the tech school and the back DY again.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you.
Mark?
I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you. I see that Sandy Fife is on Zoom. Sandy, can we have you unmute yourself? Would you like to call your meeting to order?
Do we have to close one to?
No, I'd leave it open because there may be questions going across.
I see.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, Sandy, we can.
Right. Just tell me when you're ready.
Would you like to call your meeting to order, please?
Sure. First, I want to thank the board for this time to present the Capital Budget Committee's program for 2026. I regret I cannot be there tonight, but you can hear from my voice that I'm probably better off Zooming, so I don't share this with anybody. So I'd like to introduce my committee. We do have a quorum tonight. Myself, Sandy Fife, I am the chair. Andrew Laird is there, he is the vice chair. We have a new member, Danielle Newcomb, we welcome her aboard. Ken Smith from the planning board is also there. I'm not sure if George Perkins, since I can't see who's really there, he's a representative from the finance committee. We have a few members that could not be here because they were either out of the country or out of the state. Lindsay Petro, Joseph Jamal, and we want to thank Judy Tarver. Judy Tarver has left the committee, but she was a big part of this process of this year, so we want to thank her also. I'd like to thank Bill Scott for all his hard work. We couldn't do it without him, and for the department heads. They really put a lot of effort into the capital portal. Every year they make it better and better and share more information with us, and it makes our job so much easier. So as I said, I want to thank everybody, and I'd like to turn our presentation over to Bill. He's going to go, since I don't have a voice, he's going to go through our slides, and then we'll be there to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sandy.
I hope I can mute myself so I don't cough.
Thank you. Bill Scott, Assistant Town Administrator. And what I'll do is go through the capital process and the capital improvements plan very quickly. So you saw this in December, and the reason for the December is to meet the charter requirements of December 1st. So the plan was completed on December 1st and then made available. And then just after that, we usually come into the board and we do a presentation so that everybody understands before you get into the budget committee what capital might be looking at. So this is the official handoff of the plan that as it goes to town meeting. The December plan also includes, and this plan, items that were already seen in fiscal year 2025 at the fall town meeting. So there is a crossover between two fiscal years. So the initial document facilitates a budget in the capital, and then it's reconciled in January. And the key to this is as we go through the process of getting better cost estimates and refining the warrant, we want to make sure the warrant matches the plan. So we tweak that so what's in front of you will be updated to the warrant. So the focus is the Capital Budget Committee is charged with reviewing all requests of capital and make recommendations to the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and Town Meeting. Capital item is $10,000 with a useful life, $10,000 or more, 5 years, including buildings, vehicles, computer equipment, roadways, sidewalks, et cetera. And that includes sort of the aggregate. So if you have something that is going to be equivalency of 10,000, it's still in capital. We also include in capital studies that will lead up to something that will be over that amount. So the key to this is, as the chair had mentioned, really the departments bring the submittals to the capital committee through the portal system, and capital committee doesn't really initiate those things. Although they give recommendations on what they'd like to see, it's really the departments that are responsible for getting all this information together. So the committee recommendations is a 5-year plan for the facility, for capital, and then a 10-year plan for facilities. And that is in the capital report, which is online. So if you type in Capital Budget Committee Yarmouth MA, you'll get to the website, which will have all the 2026 information. It'll include the plan, the presentation, all the profile sheets, which are online, and also the guidance document, which is mentioned. So one of the keys that they believe is the Capital Budget Committee has done a great job of going through rolling stock. There was a lot of deferred items there, you know, a 2004 Honda and things like that. They've caught up with a lot of rolling stock. Now they would really like to see a catch up on facilities. So that's the next sort of iteration of moving forward. This I'll do quickly. Everybody knows we have a cloud-based system now, and the advantage of that system is that the departments can, over the entire year, submit information and update information and change the plan as we see changes in needs for budget and capital. So that sort of real-time approach allows us to respond and adapt to the process. And the great thing about it is it gives us, as you've seen in printouts, is a good history of what's been going on just in the past 3 years. So we're updating the portal, I'll mention it later, to include rolling stock, a specific rolling stock platform that will help us track that better. This was the first iteration. This is the one where we went through a process to get to December. And the different colors are green is administration, blue is capital, and red is finance. And we were planning on the 17th of December. We were somewhere around January. So this is sort of, the initial schedule, but we already done one presentation. This is the second iteration. As you can see, there's quite a bit of FinCom or Finance Committee work, as the chair mentioned, and capital budget comes in and reconciles the warrant with this presentation this evening. So the way the system works is the town administrator reviews all the capital items and then recommends them to move forward, or doesn't recommend them to move forward. So what comes pursuant to the charter, the town administrator is submitting to capital budget, and that's all digital. And if the town administrator hits recommend, then it moves forward for them to review. And then, again, we were reviewing both fiscal year 2025 for fall town meeting and this spring town meeting. In the distant past, we sort of were missing some of the fall town meeting because as we were doing capital, the fall town meeting warrant was being done. Now we're catching everything. We're looking at CPA, and everything that expends any public money is going through the CIP now. So we have criteria which are very specific, and they provide the CIP with sort of an the Capital Budget Committee apples to apples type of presentation. It is based on essential, desirable, acceptable, and deferrable. And in discussion, we realized that significance or the importance of something is more important than readiness, but readiness is still something we should consider. So significance would be if you have a PFAS need, that's very significant, but as the engineering and everything evolves, that readiness might not be there. So we don't want to have a 50-50 split, it's 70-30, where significance is more important than readiness, but readiness is still taken into account. So the committee votes on each one of those types of criteria. So essential, desirable, you can see, essential is remedy a dangerous condition, critically needed program, possibility of losing funded, mandated by state or federal government. So clearly, wastewater, PFAS, and all those kind of issues are right up there in essential. And then if we see something that doesn't have that criteria, then we're giving it a lower rating, and if somebody rates below 3, they're not recommending it. This is the breakdown in by funding source. So these are all the different funding sources, and this is a 5-year approach. The bonded items are up at the top, and then all the various funds that go into the capital program are listed for 2025, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So the great thing about the software is we can print it out by funding source, by division, by category, that is what the project is, things like that. So you can see that we have a pretty well-populated first 5 years. And so it shows there's a lot of activity, and some of these, like wastewater funding, that represents some of the debt moving forward, or other items are representing the debt. So you've got about 110,998,000, and not all of those are actual applications. We're sticking to 2026 right now. Other than debt, those other things are still speculative until they come to town meeting. But this gives us a good picture of what's coming. This is the next 5 years, 2030 to 2034, and you can see there's 83,835,000, or a total of 194, and that also includes, some of the wastewater debt. But you can see that you're starting to see, some blank spaces. So we'd like to see at least some sort of, placeholders or speculation in the out years for facilities to say, when are we going to repair or improve or consider a new facility? So that's one of the things that the CIP committee has always talked about, is how do we sort of populate the next 5 years? It doesn't have to be, very finite. It's just that, take a look at what could be happening in the next 5 years. So this is one of the spreadsheets in your plan. So this is the way it works out. If we sort of do a debt demonstration, excuse me, and if we were not to use sort of a demonstration, I can remember when we did wastewater in 2023, and we had everything in lump sum. Wastewater was a bar that was this big, and everything else was tiny. So we want to make sure that as we move forward, at least some sort of demonstration is there to show what the actual capital obligation is for each one of those years. This is the funding source 10-year. It's sort of a data review. It's an indication of where you're, spending your money in each of the funding sources. So we see, obviously, bond, wastewater financing plan, water enterprise. There's been a lot of good work there in both PFAS and updating the pumping stations and SCADA and things like that. Free cash is up at around 11%. So this indicates, where you're spending your money, and as those things change, this chart will change each year. One thing that the committee wants to see is, can we look at sort of state or federal grants, and because it's a lower item in this chart. So there are two sets of spreadsheets. There is your pending spreadsheet, which is basically what has gone to fall town meeting and what will go to the annual town meeting, and that's this series of spreadsheets. And then there's the overall plan. This series of spreadsheets does not include any debt or any other obligation from a prior year. All it does is list the items that are moving forward in either the 2025 fall town meeting or 2026. And it sorts it by funding source. So each of those projects where you see ATM, FY 2026 is annual town meeting, FY 26, or FTM, FY 2025. So this is still free cash, and these are some of the smaller items as we move forward, for a total about $3.5 million. In your table in the warrant, free cash also has the roadway program, but that's taking out of levy. So the table in the warrant isn't just free cash. And one of the issues here is the CIP committee, as we'll point out later, has been concerned about sort of planning for free cash. And town administrator has taken a step to set aside some of the free cash money in that vein for future use in future years. And that's in your warrant as one of the warrant articles. So Warner Enterprise, this is basically what populates that chart moving forward. Golf Enterprise, a lot of that is FTM 2025, and the reason for that is they like to get their projects in, the smaller projects, so they can go to bid and get them in the ground before the season opens. So they like to see a fall town meeting because of that. Bond, raise and appropriate, and, other projects, state grants. So it may be that you'll see a project listed 3 times in here because it uses 3 funding sources. So by category, and this is an important one because it shows us where we're spending the money. The other one was showing you where you're sort of using your revenue. Infrastructure obviously is a leader at 58%. Building, it's a little bit of a misnomer because I think the entire library number is in there. So from that regard, if you were to take the library lump sum out, it's about actually 4%. Rolling stock is at 9.45, and the key to that is we've done the CIP committee and the departments have done a very effective job of sort of replacing rolling stock. So that might go down in the future because they already have a lot of rolling stock. And we will be moving forward with a rolling stock portal that if they have, let's say, Parks Department Vehicle A, we will plan that out for the next 10 years and even 20 years the way the portal works. So moving forward, some of the observations, as if we move forward with charter updates, how we can sort of create a better schedule for the CIP. Right now, in a meeting before this, we talked about maybe meeting earlier, irregardless of the charter. The delivery date for the town administrator is October 1. The delivery date for the CIP committee, Capital Budget Committee, is December 1st. So we'll stick to that. We'd like to see maybe in June a public meeting on CIP to say, what are your, observations about capital so that we can carry it into the next year. The difficulty in CIP, because of that short window, is it's hard to plan long range when you're planning for the next set of town meetings. So we're considering something that doesn't have to be covered in the charter, that we have sort of a public meeting and a long-range discussion, then we begin our process in September. Market fluctuations ever since COVID and still moving forward, and depending upon tariffs and things like that, as we move forward, there's going to be fluctuations in price. So to their credit, the departments try to give us the best cost estimate, in October, but that certainly doesn't hold till July 1. So we'd like to see if we can get an escalator there. Obviously, sometimes departments would go out and get another cost estimate, but what would be a good sort of scientific escalator for certain things to be able to understand what the number should be in July or could be? But given the fluctuation in markets, that's tough to do. But right now, a department that submits in October certainly isn't going to be asked to hold price in July. Free cash, we've already talked about that, and as I said, the town administrator has a warrant article to set aside free cash so that as that depletes, we have that sort of savings account or stabilization account moving forward. So that's a great step. Guidance document, we'd like to see that increased, and we can come back to the board on that, from 10,000 to 25,000. 10,000 is really no longer a realistic number for capital per se. Rolling stock, as I said, we're going to have a rolling stock portal, which will help the planning process moving forward. A lot of the vehicles are new, so it's really a good time to plan for their sort of depreciation, as it were. It's tough to basically say, let's plan on how to use that 2004 Honda, but it's probably good now that it's been replaced to say, okay, how do we replace the next iteration and next iteration? Now, facilities, and I'll talk about it in the next slide, this was a particular concern, and it's a concern for the committee to the extent that they want to move forward in more of an investigation or, taking a look at any deferred maintenance and work with the departments to sort of, move forward on work. And I'll get to that in a minute. Project management, the committee really appreciates the work of the departments. We just want to make sure that as you look at those projects, is there project management capacity, or, is there something that a department needs to do to keep up with everything that's in front of them? And alternate funding, community development has done a great job of tying CDC and CPA funding to our cycles, so those are sort of a good way of alternate funding. But thinking ahead, if you're looking at engineering in this year, should you be looking at grants in year 3 when you come out of there for the construction? So talking about sort of those, accessing those grants early, the capital budget committee thinks is important. So from a facilities perspective, there's a line item in there for $70,000 for the senior center. That is actually, our understanding is engineering. And to their credit, the facilities department through Public Works has done a detailed assessment of at least 5 municipal buildings. This building, the fire station, the senior center, the old police station, I forget the address, I'm sorry, that the Chamber, DNR, and Recreation are in. And they have a good estimation of what the issues are. So that's probably the first step. What's wrong with the building? What needs to be fixed as a first step? And then you engineer those solutions. And if those are mission critical issues or safety issues, then you prioritize and say, over a 10-year span, these multiple buildings should have these improvements. So it doesn't mean that you're going to go into one building and do everything. You're going to start with the things that really are crucial and move across. But the key is, and this is out of one of those assessments, that the senior center has, a structural issue which is not necessarily, an issue. It will be when we go do work on it that we need to correct, and we need a structural engineer. It's something that you wouldn't normally anticipate. So what this tells us before we start, and we're in the process of doing the architectural selection, they'll know that that's something they should be looking for. So crucial to these issues is that assessment, then the engineering, then the prioritization, then moving forward the actual capital submittals over a 10-year period. And what you'll start seeing is those out years populated as a result of that type of process. Beyond that, as you move forward and you have a good idea of the work that you have to accomplish, as you replace an HVAC system with another one, what is the maintenance due diligence to not put us in a position where we're having to replace them again, inside the manufacturer's, warranty period. So I think, we have, the senior center has a 1987 furnace. I think we could probably say that needs to be replaced given its age alone. And the assessment tells us that regardless. But as we move forward, looking at the manufacturer's recommendations and creating an operational maintenance plan, I think is the next step. So the Capital Budget Committee wants to move forward with a guidance document, and that is a detailed document telling everybody how do you submit, how do we rate, and initiate the rolling stock portal. Recommend a new schedule so we can get more involved in long-range planning, and then request all projects show some demonstration of bonding so we can understand what the capital obligation is moving forward. And if you have any questions, I could probably answer them.
Let me start with Liz.
Sure.
Okay. On the pie chart that is the funding source.
Correct. Yep.
You say free cash over 11% of all the funding sources. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
If you were to add up everything in that spreadsheet, it's about 11% of the total.
Okay, so
So
that's
this
your,
is all over
that's
the
your
whole
aim.
10 years, yeah.
Your aim, okay.
Well, not the aim, it is the actual. So everything
Okay.
you see here is the actual impact and not sort of a programmatic goal.
Okay, and then, thank you, Bill, it's a great presentation, by the way, and the committee. The senior center's capital item in the warrant, the 70,000, I misunderstood. That's for HVAC, or is it for the structural issues?
No, it's for HVAC. The structural issues, we have $200,000 for the bathrooms, and as I said, that we're in the process of hiring the architect. Fortunately, the architect will be able to start with being aware of that issue. Sometimes they don't bring in structural for something like a bathroom, but in this case, we're probably going to bring the structural in, as we're hiring the architect, so the architect will have that report to design from. So
that's not on our list here.
no, we have funding available for that already, so we'll move forward with that.
All right. And this is when you say the guidance document going from 10,000 up to 25,000, and clearly the items that are listed in this year's warrant there's one that's $1 million, and very few of them are even in the $25,000 range. But that's the list, that's the guidance you're referring to, right?
Yeah, I mean, the guidance document is actually a set of de facto bylaws for the Capital Budget Committee. But that's a good point. If you were to look at the CIP over the years, you're starting to see a diminishing number of items that are 10,000 or below 25. You have one that's 25 and a camera system upgrade, so we're recommending we go to 25,000 because we're rarely getting something at 10.
Yeah. And my question about the electric mountain bicycles, where will the officers be riding those? Is that
In
rail
the
trail?
profile sheet, they describe it as the bike trails and areas off the bike trails where they can't get their vehicles to. So in the event that they have people on, on other bikes, they'll be able to pursue them.
Okay. My last note, and I asked Bill, I asked both Bob and Bill about the list includes, as Bill has said, rolling stock replacement, and it's hybrids where, for the most part, but I'm being concerned about and promoting EV mostly because it's so low in maintenance costs. So I asked him about that, and he was pretty clear on wherever it can be hybrid, it is hybrid. And I think as you use your chart and you start projecting forward and knowing that we were supposed to go towards EV to help with climate change from the federal government's mandates, but I don't know where that's going. But if you replaced the stock with EVs and projected maintenance, I think it would prove in the charting how that's going to lower costs substantially.
I think what we need to do, we looked at EV for building, but building made a very good point. In the middle of a storm when all the power's out and they're out on the street for a considerable amount of time, they're using hybrids. So we don't want to get in a situation where we have to plug in after they're out there for, so many hours going back and forth like the electrical inspector might during an ice storm when there's a lot of power outages. And from the perspective of Public Works, their heavy-duty vehicles are not really commensurate with some of the pure EVs. So the state is working on a new approach to vehicles and is going to hand down legislation that...
Right, that the state's going to help a lot with this.
Yeah, and understanding that. And the difficulty obviously is beyond the issue of operational capabilities, it's availability of the stock.
Yes,
So
agreed. But I would note, though, that with the new Level 3 chargers, you can get 300 miles in 45 minutes.
Wow.
So you don't need to get the whole 300 in the case of a storm. So
Right.
but you have to make sure you have a facility that's got the emergency batteries built in. Okay, thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Joyce?
Oh, thank you for a very clear presentation. I'm amazed the difference it makes when you have a pie chart but suggests 3 dimensions. It really just
yeah.
hits it home better. I had a couple questions about the whole thing with the inventory of the buildings. I think the facilities condition assessment's a great idea, and probably we would have caught things in the past if we had done that more often. Do you foresee doing that, say, every 2 years, every 3 years?
I think what you're looking at is you do a facilities condition, then you engineer the items that need to be engineered, then you create the capital plan, and then you evaluate the plan. So if your assessment said this roof needs to be done, you know, you engineer it, you put it in a capital plan based on its urgency, and then you might evaluate the buildings again, but you wouldn't have to do that as much because you're improving them as you're moving forward.
So just updates really to
Yeah,
what you
so I mean,
already
it's
have.
updates, it's an evaluation of the program. Did we do this work? Is it done, or are we going to postpone it in the plan? Things like that. The advantage of the facilities assessment is what are your targets for engineering and architecture, and then what are your and how does that sequence into the plan?
Okay, thank you. And I just had one other question, and that's about putting together new uses for buildings. I mean, do you keep any sort of idea list of where, say, a new department could go, or where a building might be better used?
Given meeting room space, that's a good question, because it's tough to land some of all the committees we've been working with, but that's as much of a programmatic issue. Is the building that is being used by Department X sufficient for their purpose? So as you do the engineering for the fixes, you also might do a programmatic view and say, why are we improving this building for a department that can't fit it in anymore? So it's important when you get to the buildings that obviously have some programmatic issues, you also take a look at the programming, because it wouldn't make sense to make a whole bunch of improvements in a building that isn't working for those departments.
Okay, thank you. What was making me think of that was the colorful history of the old, small fire building behind the West Yarmouth Library. A colorful history of many uses and many promises.
Right.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Tracy?
Thank you. Thanks for all your work on this. We've come a long way in terms of the information that's provided. The process has changed somewhat. I was surprised to hear that Bob gets the first brush at kind of saying what goes forward. That never happened in the past. It always went through capital budget.
That's actually charter, if I didn't want to interrupt. The charter says he delivers
Yeah,
it to them. Yeah.
Yes, so I'm not sure that happened previous. And do we have a definition of capital? Because that's really, you know, when you talk about the guidance, it's the same thing like when we talk about the school capital, right? Like that's something that we look at, like what's the threshold? You know, people ask for a lot. Unfortunately, we're not seeing anymore the things that haven't been approved. So I don't know what's fallen off, what didn't get the opportunity, so to speak. We used to get kind of a list that this board had a little bit more influence on the free cash than it does now. It's pretty much all taken. But anyway, one thing I didn't see, and when you talk about the capital plan, I'm used to like long-range borrowing capital. This is basically short-term capital for smaller items. You know, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the fire station upstairs and, you know, the big borrowing items that we plan for over a course of time for buildings or remodeling, things like that. That's what I usually think of when I think of a long-range capital plan. This is kind of like a piece of that.
Well, in the online, you'll see the 10-year spreadsheet with everything in
The
it.
bigger stuff, okay.
Yeah, and this is just for the pending town meetings, and by funding source, it'll break out. You're right, there's a lot of small projects, but there's a pumper in here for $2 million. There's $4.4 million for the equalization tank. So there's some large projects in here.
But those are funded, so the tank is funded out of the receipts we already have. There's not borrowing for that, correct?
No, that will be borrowing, because the receipts probably won't cover it. Is that correct, Bob, I think?
That is right. It is a big project.
Okay. So the other thing I'm surprised to see on here is the, so to speak, override for roadway improvements. I thought at one point in time we had worked that back into the levy.
Oh, yes, and that's what it's referred to as the override, is that there was a period of time when we first started this process, that 1.1 million was not being used for roadway maintenance.
Right.
It was being used for other things, and so one of the things that we did is we restored that full property tax 1.1 million that was voted by the town to that roadway maintenance. And so it's reflected in his
I know, but in
slide,
here-
and it's also reflected in the town meeting warrant.
Right, I'm looking at that, but it's funded through free cash here.
No, it
That's
is
what this,
not.
the explanation of this article says it. It's funded through free
If
free
you-
cash.
You just gotta look at it a little closer.
The CIP has it under raise and appropriate.
I'm reading the warrant.
No, I know, and then in the warrant,
Together. I'll show you.
It says at the bottom, the articles here for the capital improvement fund are funded through free cash.
Says Article 19.
you need to delete that.
To
sentence.
see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of 1,100,000 and to transfer and appropriate from free cash the sum of 3,521,289. So they go together. The first thing it does is it
Saying the
is it
explanation needs to be
takes it
changed.
1.1 million.
Right, and to your point, we need to delete that. It's probably a transfer copy from the CIP.
Okay,
to-
that's fine,
there.
as long as it went into the levy, because that's where I thought it
Yeah.
was, and then I thought it was being funded back. The cruisers marked and unmarked 10 years for 306,000, what is that? That's also separate from the article for the 58,000 for the police cruiser financing.
So the cruisers that are in there in free cash represent leases that were already approved at town meeting, and they're continually being paid. The 58,000 represents a new series of leases and is required to go to town meeting for the authorization.
So this 306 represents the past multiple
Past,
years?
correct. And there's a pretty detailed spreadsheet, which you give the board, which shows the entire lease schedule for the next 10 years.
One of the things I didn't see in this plan is the debt drop-off. Do we know how much debt we have dropping off in this cycle and what's happening with that?
And that's something that the CIP committee, or the Capital Budget Committee has mentioned, is sort of incorporating debt both inside the portal and then showing, where in that spreadsheet over the years. So let's take a look at, that spreadsheet is a 5-year, and then the 10-year by funding source. We want to be able to show that also. So we're looking at, how do we incorporate debt when when the item moves forward, it's speculative, that we might not borrow for several years. So we'll be working with the Finance Department, Finance Committee to figure out how to demonstrate that in that. There is the demonstration, and then there's also the existing debt. So what we would have to do is go back inside the portal and add projects that are several years old to have their debt show up here.
So, but what's the mechanism for that drop-off to then be replaced? Are we replacing any drop-off this year? And how do I see where that, what the mechanism is, what the article is that allows the levy to stay the same?
Right, and that's more of a function of the, town administrator, finance committee, and finance department to basically show that. We'd like to show it here, but when that debt drops off, then they're basically saying we have more room in levy, so let's put these projects in it.
But there has to be a way for us to approve that to fill the levy.
Right.
We can't just do it without approval,
And
so that's what.
Right, and that's why the town administrator starts the capital process to basically say, I have room here, or there's free cash here.
Okay, maybe, maybe it's a question to Jennifer. Do we know exactly what our levy is dropping off this year and how we're filling it?
Yeah.
Where the article is that allows us to do that?
Is it on? Okay. Really, it's an operating budget issue. So Yarmouth traditionally, you have two types of drop-off. You have excluded debt drop-off, and then you have debt drop-off within your operating budget. It isn't something that we've talked about as a policy of moving that in the operating budget to pay capital out of the operating budget. It's not something that you will see in this in this FY '26 budget, but there was a little bit of drop off. So you would look at from '25 to '26 in the operating budget, and you also have to look at your excluded debt as well.
So I imagine in the operating budget, the debt was allowed by town meeting vote, so you can keep that levy the same, right? So when you have excluded debt, that has to go away,
Right.
or it has to be revoted on.
Exactly. So it really is, what you're talking about is the debt drop-off policy and how we're managing the debt drop-off policy. I think that's really what your question is.
I just wanted to know if there was any excluded debt that we're dropping off that would virtually reduce taxes this upcoming or next fiscal year.
Yeah, good question. So let me back up. So let's just focus on excluded debt, if that's what you're looking at. So you have two, not types of excluded debt, but we have excluded debt. I think DPW is excluded, and there's some other smaller projects, but also you have the school department. So actually, it has dropped off a little bit, your excluded debt from the school assessment that goes on your, what they call the DE1 on your tax rate. So you do see that drop off. The best way to probably look at that would be if you look at your budget, and I have a budget overview, and it actually calculates the tax levy. It will show you the debt drop off from, the excluded debt from 25, and then the excluded debt in 26. And the difference will be dropping off that. And usually what you would normally do is, if you had a policy to always have the same excluded debt, you'd have a project that you would put in that would have to be voted, and you have to manage it in such a way where your principal and interest or interest would be filling those gaps of
Right.
the excluded
And
debt.
the reason I'm asking all this was because some time ago, when we were anticipating the sewer, that was one of the, we talked a lot about where we were able to utilize that drop-off to be able to infill it for sewer borrowing. So I'm just curious, when we're looking in the future for, phase two, so to speak, if we are going to have any availability with that.
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, Bob and I have talked about that. We've had several discussions and had talked conceptually on how he would want to present that to the board.
Yeah, and there's a couple of words that I want to mention about the debt structure of the community that have changed rather substantially over the last 5 years that really colors, the present direction that, right now we have very little debt inside Prop 2.5. Very little. It's, one of the things that was done in terms of planning for the town's debt, because of the wastewater infrastructure, the town took on very, very little new debt, so that capacity under the town's debt limit could be reserved for future wastewater. But the thing that is really most noticeable is that since 2000 and the 2020 budget, the growth excluded debt has really about doubled because of the new school projects that we've taken on. So currently now, the gross in FY '25, the excluded debt is almost $5 million, 4.99. And next year, we're on a schedule that it declines slightly every year. So in FY '26, it's going down 45,000 to 4,951,408, and that reduction, again, it's excluded debt, and it's we wouldn't have a small project that would reallocate that. What we'd like to see is it when that goes down, say 45,000 a year, when it gets to a point where additional capacity is there, you can have new debt and it won't increase the tax rate. So I think that, we've seen marked increases from educational spending, both at the middle school. We have a new school at the tech school, and we don't have any new money for wastewater, but as we move into the subsequent phases, that may change because, the other sources, non-property tax sources of funding, are not growing as they were in the past, so.
Okay, well, it's not related to this particular warrant, but it's still important. My only other question was related to the 5-year review of funding sources and the state grants. And I'm wondering if you consider the SRF funds, state grants, and where that positions us with the potential new, I guess, recommendations. Although I'm happy to hear that it doesn't affect this round, but, well,
You mean in terms of the capital budget committee recommendations? in
no,
terms
I'm
of-
talking about the funding sources that you have here
Yeah.
for state grants.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not quite sure as SRF shows up at a grant, it's, except for the forgiveness, it's a loan. What we want to see is if, when somebody comes in for engineering, they're already working to seek the grant. So by the time they get to capital, they're poised to go after the grant. That's what the capital budget committee is looking for.
So do we know what this 14 million in the next 5 years reflects
In which,
in the state grants?
I'm trying
It's
to-
the third from the bottom, but you're on the second set, but on the right-hand side, it says 14 million,
Yeah,
6.
that would be in the first state grant. Yeah, it would be all of those, and those out years might be projected numbers. That is, people are looking, oh, I know what that is, that's probably the library.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Mark?
Just a question on procedure. Are we going to be going through the individual projects shortly? Is that the game plan?
We usually don't. I mean, I can call them up, they're all online, but we, usually you do those as warrant articles when you approve the warrant articles, when you come up to those CIP items.
Well, we set this up as a public hearing so that the public can comment on the individual projects. So I think it would be,
Beneficial.
well, I'll say, yeah, if you're going to hold a public hearing on your capital budget and then you don't show the capital budget, I think that becomes a bit problematic. Yeah, I think we need to literally go through slide 15 through 20 and literally explain to the public what it is that we're doing with each of these items. Am I incorrect? I mean, that's how we used to do these.
We used to have all the department
I
heads.
think that's part of what
Okay.
the public's waiting for. It makes sense that this is going to be one of our reviews of the town warrant, and we're
Right,
finishing
right.
up on the 18th, so it kind of dovetails into each.
I mean, your warrant has all of the capital items. Do you want to go there, or I can call up the
I think-
profile sheets that are online? I just need a minute to go
I think
to
it would be
online.
helpful to go through the presentation material that you have, and go through, and then maybe at the end of each section, invite, if there's comment, Madam Chair,
Yes.
and then that way we can go through them, so as a group. And that way, we don't have to do this again.
Okay.
And when we go through the warrant article, we will have accomplished a fair amount of review. But I think since we've characterized this discussion as a public hearing, I think we need to give the public an opportunity to comment on the capital items that we've laid out here, so.
You don't mind, we'll focus on the ATM ones, the annual town meeting, and not go back to the fall town meeting. So there are fall town meeting ones there that
I
are
think that would
probably
be-
more-
That's what I think people are really
All right.
interested in.
If you want, I'll just start from the top
Right.
in the funding source, and I know most, if not all, of these projects to be able to explain them briefly. And
Now,
to
what I'd
the-
like to suggest, Madam Chair, is in the interest of time, I know we want to give the public a chance to comment, so my suggestion would be, we go through a group, ask if there are public
questions on
comments
that
from the
group?
public,
Sure.
and then questions from the board, and I would defer to the public first. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Just procedurally, just so that we can get through this?
Well, can I just ask that we do it in order of the articles then, and not by this? Because the first article for capital on here is golf, and then it goes to the equalization. I don't care how you do it, but I just think it's confusing for people that are following.
I don't have any objections. I just want to have a fairly orderly and thoughtful process by which we can present this information and get comments from both the board and the public. That's all I'm asking for.
I mean, while we incorporate the warrant in it, that's the plan that shows it by funding source. So either way works. I can explain most of these projects as the person who puts them together. I can either do the warrant.
I do the warrant, Bill.
All right, great. I don't have anything to show up on the screen for that,
Right.
though, moving forward. All right, let me get to golf capital. You give me a minute. There we go. So golf capital involves pro shop furniture and fixtures, core harvester, replace a tractor, and replace an F-350 truck. There's 50,000 for the pro shop, core harvester 50,000, tractor 70,000, and the truck. Both of the vehicle expenses you can see is a 2001 tractor, a 2008 F-350 truck. Both need a replacement. The core harvester is a piece of equipment that actually picks up the cores. So when they aerate the golf course, they take out cores and then they replace that with a different soil type to get better drainage and also allow the sort of grass to grow together much tighter. It has a substantial, reduction in staff time because usually they rake up the cores. So it's very important. And the pro shop furniture and fixtures is absolutely necessary. Some of the, hanging racks and everything else are literally falling apart. So the total for that is 245. That is Article 11. Any question on that one?
I don't see any questions from the public. If any of you have any questions as we're going through this process, please put your hand up so we know. Okay, Joe Glenn. You have a question on the golf? You have to unmute.
Yes, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, probably a naive question, but I guess being from the public, we're not going to know these answers. That's why we're asking. The Golf Enterprise Fund and the capital, how is that separated? In other words, does any capital expenditures come from the Golf Enterprise Fund, or where does that stand now?
So the golf pays their capital out of the enterprise fund, their retained earnings in the enterprise fund as of 11/19/2024 is $2,388,396. So they have sufficient amount of money to cover these expenses, and it does not come from taxation.
Do you have any other questions, Joe? Any other questions on golf? Moving on to the next.
Is Article 12, equalization tank rehabilitation. This is a very important asset that upon a detailed analysis by the Public Works Department, they discovered that the tank is beginning to wear away. They actually drive trucks over this tank. So this is to completely rehabilitate the tank as indicated in the explanation. The tank holds raw septage before it enters into the treatment facility, and they don't drive trucks over it anymore because it's in that bad of a condition. They just finished an assessment that showed the condition. They had camera work inside the tank. So this is a very important asset to the septage division, and it prevents the leakage into the surrounding environment when they replace the tank.
And the amount requested?
It is $4.4 million, and I believe that's being borrowed.
Okay. Any questions from the public or the board?
Madam
I don't
Chair.
see any from the public.
Okay, Madam Chair, I believe this is also an enterprise account,
Correct.
so that whatever the debt service is, that's covered by the fees. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the next item.
So Water Department capital various items, that is Article 13. The Water Department usually comes in with capital items, and to their credit, we're seeing a lot of great improvements to catch up on some of their pumping stations and vehicles and their production system hardware. They're basically SCADA system. So they have a distribution system improvements. They put a regular allocation in there to be able to fix water pipes and things like that. production system hardware, which I believe is the SCADA system, which is a system that controls the entire system, and they're doing a great job of creating one synonymous sort of system that does a better job of talking to many of the buildings that they control. And then the new pickup truck and replace the utility truck are in there. These, again, are all in the capital, budget website as individual profile sheets that are there. So what they do is incrementally come in with improvements. And in this case, there's a distribution system at 282,200. Production system hardware at 850,000, new pickup truck at 80,000, and the utility truck at 100,000. The utility truck includes a utility bed and plow. All of these trucks normally require plows so they can get out there and do all of the assets that they have to take care of, which is their pumping station, their well locations, and things like that. So the total is $1.312,200 for Water Department capital, and that's usual sort of article every single year.
And once again, this is not coming out of the property tax dollars?
No, it is not. It is out of their enterprise fund.
And how much currently do they have in the enterprise fund?
As of 7/1/2024, $2,540,611.
Okay. Do we have any questions on this item? I see none from the public. The board? Okay, moving on to the next item.
Wells number 10 and 11 PFAS treatment system, Article 14. Now, this is the part of that very crucial program that you remember the Water Department came to you and asked for study or analysis money to basically set up what is the next expenditure. To their credit, they're sort of out in front of the curve of some of the PFAS treatment demands and regulations. And this one is for $5,050,000 for wells number 10 and 11. And this is to design the PFAS system for 10 and 11. And it indicates in the explanation that well number 10 exceeded the newly promulgated Massachusetts maximum contaminant levels. And the proposed treatment system will allow the Water Division to return well number 10 to service, and will keep well number 11 in service, meeting the EPA regulations of 2028. So this is a bond repayment, and it is enterprise fund, which is not tax levy.
Any questions from the public?
I think it would be helpful if we knew exactly, if you could remind us where the wells are.
That was
10 and
going to be
11.
my question.
Jeff's here.
Jeff's here, thank God.
I saw your face. You were like,
Ready for Bill's answer. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. These are two of the wells that are off of Forest, just south of the disposal area.
Okay. So they're on the, is it the west side of Forest Road?
That's correct, the west side, yes.
Do we know what the source of the PFAS contamination is?
We don't have a conclusive determination, but because of the dense population around this well, as well as 4 and 5 that we just completed treatment for, we suspect it's from individual on-site septic systems.
Okay, that's very helpful to know. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next item.
Article 15, Water Main, Route 28. In 2024, $15.6 million was authorized for this. An additional $2 million is necessary, and this will be added to the $15.6 million that was authorized in 2024 for a total project of $17.6. The construction is already underway, commensurate with working with the sewer project. So this is an ongoing program. That additional $2 million was necessary, and I think the area is close to the bridge area going over to Dennis, at least from my understanding of the scope. It is in conjunction with the Mass DOT Bass River Bridge project and the installation of sewer along 28.
Okay.
There's a little typo in that one, just available for this purpose and to enter into. It's right in the middle. Line starts with available for this purpose. You see it, Bill?
Yep.
Okay, in two.
So that's Article 15, Water Main Route 28, $2 million for that project.
And the funding for that is coming from?
Steel Enterprise, and I believe this is adding to the prior bond authorization, and it's fully supported by water revenues.
Okay. I don't see any questions from the public. Any of the board? Moving on to the next item?
No, on the public, you have two, I think you have.
No, those
No,
are
they're
muted.
just
those
muting
muted?
themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
No.
checking.
I got my eye on it.
Okay.
So, Article 16, Police Cruiser Financing. As explained earlier in the warrant article, we'll see later, there's $306 million for cruiser financing. That represents the leases that are already approved. At the initiation of a lease, it requires town meeting authorization, then it requires you request the funds at subsequent town meetings, and hence they usually move to free cash. In this case, it is acquiring 4 police cruisers, and the amount annually starting in 2026 is $58,850, repeating through 2027, 8, and 9. So this one is typically paid for from free cash as for this initial authorization, the 2026, and then future authorizations.
So in Article 19, that 306
Correct.
includes the 58 here?
No, it does not.
So where is it?
It's authorized here and then
But
there.
it says that it's paid for through free cash, but it's not on our free cash list.
Yeah, because it will be debited from free cash, but we wanted to separate it because this, the initiation of a lease requires a separate article. So we're putting it here, and then we'll debit from free cash. And then when you get to free cash, you're listing everything that was approved prior. So we can't put the 58 there, it will be redundant, essentially. We can't put it in with the 306, which would be 385, something like that.
So this total,
It's about 385 or 386 total between the two. So here, we're basically starting the lease and debiting it from free cash.
I understand how much, so this number of free cash is not the actual number of free cash we're utilizing.
No, and again, I think going back to the earlier discussion, this table shouldn't reference it as being free cash solely, which we will make that correction in the warrant. This is a mix where you see up in that table, we're looking at Article 19, capital expense, various departments. Item 3, roadway improvements, that's the amount that's from the levy. So this $4,621,289 is all articles that are free cash plus the levy, which is 1.1 million.
Plus 58.
And then the 58 will come out of there, and then later, there's an article to debit free cash for both wastewater and a stabilization fund. That will also come out of free cash.
I know the question's going to come up at the town meeting. What is the new balance of free cash? So that should be evident somewhere.
Might as well ask me what the wells
Jennifer,
are.
do we have that?
It's 7,792,7.
We were certified at a little over 11 million, and then after appropriation in this town meeting, I think we're going to have about 1.7.
This says 7.79.
Well, can I just make a comment? Okay, so when we look at the articles in the town meeting warrant booklet, there's several articles that come from free cash. So I keep a running tally on a spreadsheet just to make sure, where we're at. If you put something in the explanation on one of the articles, this is our balance of free cash. It's the balance of free cash if everything has been appropriated. So I don't know, I think there's something in the warrant that might be a little bit confusing that we can take out, but it's something can be part of a presentation. But I believe it's going to be about 1.7, maybe a little bit less. We've moved some things around after the appropriation. And the big issue is when you get to a later article is that we're moving $1 million into the wastewater stabilization fund, and we're requesting movement of $1 million into the capital stabilization fund. But it will leave, you'll still have a balance of free cash.
I don't see how.
I clear it up. Does that clear it up for you, Tracy?
No, I guess we haven't gotten to the point where it debits it, so I haven't,
Okay, Liz?
That's after all the articles in the warrant.
So if everything gets approved, we would have a balance of 1.7.
That's correct.
So how can we move 1 million to a stabilization?
No, so we were certified at $11 million, okay, after last fiscal year. We spent money in the fall town meeting.
Right.
That left us, I think, maybe a little over
7.7.
7 million,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so everything that's in this warrant, if it is approved at town meeting, leaves you a balance of 1.7 million.
So the stabilization's included in that?
Yes.
transfers.
Thank you.
It's all in?
That's the question.
Yeah.
So,
Good.
if I may, regarding the cruisers, in the CIP plan, you can see the combined 58,000 and the 306 under the cruisers, because that's all from free cash. Whereas you have the lease over here in a separate warrant article, and then in the table, which is not solely free cash, you have 306. But in the plan, it shows replace cruisers on mark 10-year, 365, 478, which is a combination of those two expenditures.
Okay.
All right, so where we were at police cruiser financing or
Fire department?
fire department capital expense, each year the fire department replaces, some of their technical equipment and their fire gear as they are needed. So Article 17 is fire department capital expense. It is a Chevy Tahoe replacement at $85,000. Payment to stabilization is a payment that they're paying back into a stabilization for funds that were provided to buy a pumper, I believe. So that is a sort of method to use a fire department fund to replace, engine 42. Technical response analysis. Now, that is an analysis which is a determination under Fire Codes 1710. You're supposed to locate facilities within 4 minutes and then 10 minutes based on whether or not it's a life safety issue or a building issue. This analysis basically tells you where might you want to put a station based on the best area for response times. So it's a very detailed analysis, and the chief, to his credit, has already looked at some scoping in this area and has a good idea on how to proceed. But this analysis is really required because fire stations respond from the building, police respond from patrol routes. So fire stations have to be serve 80% of the population within 4 minutes if they want it life safety, and within 10 if it's preserving a building. Somewhere on that, don't exactly quote me. Fire gear is obviously their gear and their protective gear, which they replace because there are recommendations on when it wears out. So that is from fire receipts reserved for appropriation has a balance of $3,141,587. The total there for the Tahoe at $85,000, stabilization $100,000, response analysis is $62, and fire gear at $100 is $347 is the request. And again, this happens just about every year with either a vehicle, the fire gear, and the stabilization. The technical response is new ask.
I don't see any questions from the public. The board, any questions?
No, Bill had noted that there was a dollar sign missing in front of the 3 million in the explanation. He caught that.
Okay, moving on to the next item.
Article 18, Fire Department Quint Pumper. Now, a Quint Pumper is a combination pumper and ladder. So they're looking at a variant of way of replacing the pumper. The issue with this is by the time you order the asset, it's several years out. So this ask is to get the authorization so they can move forward with the order, and they might not be getting it for several years. They can't make the order to the company until they have the authorization. The explanation is pretty detailed in terms of how they're moving forward with their rolling stock, and this is $2 million for a Quint pumper, which is a combined ladder / pumper. And it's to set the stage for ordering the asset, which several years later, it's delivered. The build on these vehicles are probably 4, sometimes 5 years.
Okay, I don't see any questions from the public. Any of the board members? Moving on to the next item.
Capital expense, various departments, Article 19. So we'll make sure that we clean up the language on this, but there are two separate funding sources here. There's the funding source for the roadway program, which is from the levy or raise and appropriate. And then the free cash sum is $3,521,289. The free cash is up on the screen, with the exception of that $1,100,000, which is the roadway improvements program. Everything else is pretty much the same. You just want to be careful of reading a fall town meeting one versus a annual town meeting one. And using the warrant, we're showing a lease, which is from a prior year, shows up here, wastewater dredge, beach nourishment. To the credit of DNR, they're doing a great job working with the county to continually look at opportunities for dredge and beach nourishment. And if you look at the CIP and the funding source, you'll see that'll show up in free cash, but it'll also show up in a state grant. So they have some grant funds for that. Roadway improvements is out of levy. Replace security door. There's a security door in the police department that they need to be more effective in terms of being able to transport prisoners, and there are better ways to do it, and they want to make sure that is effective, and so they're looking at $25,000 for that. Security gate motor replacement, that's something that malfunctions, so they're looking at $20,000 for that. Pistol upgrade, which happens periodically, is $186,505. Cruisers marked, 306,628, and that is all the cruisers that have already had an approved lease. The lease, as mentioned before, is $58,000 for the new lease. The annual program network, the IT department has a very methodical program to improve the network, and they set aside $100,000 each year to do that. Camera system upgrade, the DNR has cameras at key locations for boater safety. In fact, it was mentioned to me that, sometimes when they get a call, they can turn those cameras to a certain location and help understand, what some of the issues are as they're responding. So they're upgrading the cameras, in that request. Annual PC program, again, it's IT sort of incrementally and methodically going through. Senior Center HVAC, that is basically to determine the sort of what the correct fix is and design, and I believe it's working with Rise Engineering and Cape Cod, is it Collaborative? Or
Cape Light Compact?
Cape Light Compact to determine what are the fixes for that. It's quite an extensive system that's there now. Stormwater MS4 compliance, this is an annual request, and it allows us to keep compliance with regulations, but it also is a great planning tool as they're doing capital. They know what some of the stormwater implications are. The engineering van is desperately needed. If you look at online portal, I think it's an old Econoline van that's probably got 8 miles to the gallon and things like that. And those types of things aren't exactly the best vehicles to go off-road in, which is, something the engineering might need. Town Hall roof replacement, they have a very detailed sort of cost estimate for that. One of the questions that Select Board Member Argo asked is, what about the solar panels? Under the cost estimate, those will be removed by and then replaced by others. So that's not inside the cost estimate, but I believe the cost estimate was around $165,000 total. So the 200, I believe, takes in that account. Replace cement walkway sanitation. There is considerable deterioration, which, is something that we want to take care of. railings and other things that are necessary. Replacement vehicle for recreation, Explorer, that's necessary because their vehicle, I forget what the age of the vehicle is. We have it on the profile sheet, but they're usually, somewhere around the, 2010 or things like that, their vehicles. And by getting the Explorer, they're able to put all their equipment inside the vehicle and lock it instead of having a pickup truck. Sandy Pond tennis court resurfacing, that's definitely something that needs to be done based on its condition. Chasebrook Park, that's $373,150, and I believe CPA is matching that somewhere around $820,000 for the total project. Replace 2016 4x4 150 extended cab DNR. That's $77,000. I think that will round out and complete their fleet. And that has certain equipment in it that has a fit up because they are quasi-public safety, and essentially all the fit up on the equipment is within that cost. And it also has the necessary towing capacity for boats and other things that they need to handle. Station Ave Elementary School playground replacement, they have $200,000. They also are listed in the CIP under a separate account. They're able to obtain a grant for that. And they're working very closely with the Recreation Department on sort of coordination. Kubota excavator is pretty straightforward. It's aged, and the most important thing about that one is the current excavator doesn't have the load capacity that they really need in their business. Pickleball courts resurfacing, very active courts, and they need resurfacing periodically. I think they use a surface material that is sort of not Teflon or something like that, but it eventually wears out over time. The forklift, and that's another one where they need to replace it, but it's also another one where they need to make sure that they're, as you can see, a 1999 forklift. They're replacing it, and it's also something that has more heavy-duty capacity. M.E. Small Elementary, as the school department, they could probably explain better, moves forward, we want to be able to look at building repairs in the interim without making a substantial investment in a building that we're going to be moving on from. So those are repairs based on some estimates to get to the more crucial issues in the building. Station Ave Elementary School flooring, that's been around for a while, but there were issues with the subflooring at one time, and I believe they've solved them so they can go and attack the flooring issue. Parks and Grounds, utility, $80,000. That, again, it's a replace a 2012 F-250 utility with a plow, and that's necessary. That's probably, to their credit, they went, as we went through rolling stock, they went after the most, crucial and vehicles that are in the worst shape, and they're rounding out, replacing the rest of their vehicles. Exmart mower with a cemetery is $20,000. Mack truck, 1998, sanitation, $60,000. Station Ave Elementary interior painting for $50,000. And purchase electric mountain bicycles for $15,000. So that is mentioned earlier, is something that they're using for the bike trails and other areas that are inaccessible by cruisers, so they can either help, seek people who need aid, or pursue people in areas where they can't get a cruiser. And again, we'll change the language to make sure there's no confusion between the fact that there's both levy and free cash in the table, whereas in the CIP, it's purely free cash.
Can I just ask one question about it? I guess, I've been reviewing our regional agreement, and I know Dr. Smith's here, and I'm not opposed to doing repairs, but now that the school department has their own capital budget or capital stabilization fund, how do we determine who's paying for what? What falls under the school district's capital and what falls under our capital?
So usually that's split based on the percentage, so.
Both our schools.
Dennis, well, if it's purely our school, like Emmy Small, it's all us.
So
If it's a split,
the school capitalization is only for regional schools, that's what you're saying?
no, I'm irregardless of the capitalization account, in terms of how it's divided, if it's our school, it's 100% us. If it is a school that's DY, it is split in the CIP.
I understand the percentage, I'm just trying to determine how.
We don't have a rule. That's
Okay.
something that has to be worked out.
Okay.
There's no rules right now.
Okay.
I don't see any questions from the public. Any other questions from the board?
Just a quick one, go, Joyce.
No, go ahead.
Just a quick one. I forgot. I think you told us that the cruisers that are marked and unmarked on item 6 are going to be uplifted. That's in the cost.
Well, the 306,628 and item 6 is all the cruiser leases that were approved at prior town meetings. The 58,000 that has a separate warrant article is a new request for a lease, Article 16. So it has to be listed as a separate article because it's a new lease.
Right. What about
The
the
58 is not in the 306.
No, there's always the added cost of outfitting the cruisers.
I believe they put the outfitting in the,
That's my recollection,
They
and
kept it-
Richard's back there shaking his head.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Joyce?
Oh, thanks. I just had one question. If you could give us maybe a 1 to 2 sentence indication of the improvements intended for Chase Brook Park. I know people are going to ask, so I would love
It's
to
harder
know.
than locating the wells.
Let me take a cut.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff?
Combining the three parks into one park, and in addition, doing all of the work to landscape and install. There's a bridge that goes over the water there, and invasive species management. So together, those will be one organized park.
And is the
Okay, thank
maintenance, is the maintenance included in that, or in our budget upcoming? I mean, we invested to do it before, and it's overgrown, so I'm hopeful that when we get this done, that we have a maintenance budget for.
We'll have a maintenance plan for that.
Okay, any other questions?
No, on the Chase Brook, I mean, it is something that has, to the credit of Community Development Office, they have done a really difficult task of bringing in a whole bunch of different funding sources to sort of reduce the town side of the cost. So it's a pretty complex spreadsheet in terms of some of the federal funding they've obtained, state funding they've obtained, CPA and everything else. So this is part of augmenting that, the 373, 150.
Okay, next article?
I think that's it.
I think that's it for capital.
You're off the hot seat.
Wow, like a congressional hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got your appointment, so.
Yes.
Lucky guy.
As the, just for the board, everybody is here, and the public, if you type in Capital Budget Committee, Yarmouth, Mass, you'll get to their webpage, and the detailed profile sheets are there. The actual CIP plan and other things are there for this year and also prior years. So it's a great way of learning even more than what you heard this evening.
Thank you very much, Bill.
You're welcome.
Okay, we're now going to be calling on the Cape Cod Technical Regional High School. Chris, you're bringing out your hat.
Yeah, of course.
Did you want to check about the materials
Do you guys have the presentation and the line item budget,
Both documents?
both documents? Okay.
And this one, the line item budget that you're talking about?
It should be both of these here. It should be both of these?
Right.
There should be a green light on the top.
We have them, Chris.
Okay, you
There it
got it?
goes.
Everybody's got it? Okay, good.
I've only been working at a technical school for 31 years. You'd think I'd figure it out by now.
The kids were here, they could help you for
Yeah,
sure.
they would embarrass me, I promise you.
For the sake of the public, if you could also introduce yourselves for us, please.
Certainly, well, first, go, Chris?
Actually, you go first, sir.
Okay. Robert Sanborn, Superintendent, Cape Cod Regional Technical High School in Harwich, Massachusetts.
Should mention these doctors. This is on Dr. Sanborn. I'm Christine Greeley. I'm one of the two representatives from Yarmouth who sit on the school committee for Cape Tech. Norm Michaud is not here tonight, but he's been very actively involved in the creation of this because he's on the finance subcommittee for the tech.
Thank you.
So
Dr. Sanborn, it's all yours.
Thank you very much. So, as Chris said, this is our Finance Subcommittee. We've been working since we presented the first budget in October, but the work really begins back in April, the prior April, working with our departments. My business manager, Aaron Orcutt, working with the staff to develop an initial budget, and that gets presented to this group in October. And we came to a finalized budget that I'm presenting this evening in January. It was presented to our school committee in January, and they voted on it and had a public hearing in February. So this is a school committee-approved budget at this point in time. So let's look at enrollment at Cape Cod Tech. This year we have increased by 19 students. The town of Yarmouth has decreased by 5, however, so that'll be reflected in some ways in the both assessments because of the decrease in students from 25 to 26. Of the overall population, Barnstable contributes the most amount of students at 28.5%, but Yarmouth is second at 20.6%, and then you can see as it decreases from there.
You also should mention that Dennis has 10.7% too, so that they are actually combined, the DY population combined is greater than Barnstable.
Yeah, almost 60% of the school is accounted for by those 3 towns.
Yeah.
And this is a longer view. You'll see back in 21, we were 616 students. We're now at 681. The building was built for 650. We have over 150 student waiting list as I speak this evening. So the budget I'm presenting, oh, I might have gone too far there. Yeah, the budget I'm presenting this evening is the highest budget I've ever presented to a Board of Selectmen in my tenure. As you can see, the history from 19, the last 2 years have been significant increases. This one is no exception. I will get into the drivers of that as I move along, but that's a $993,000 increase over 25 spending. So what funds this? Primarily, it's the 12 towns. We serve the towns of Provincetown all the way to Mashpee. So the 13, almost $14 million coming from those 12 in the form of operating assessments. And then we have 2 sources of state aid, just like Dennis Yarmouth. We have Chapter 70 and Chapter 71, which is transportation reimbursement. And we have a small amount of local revenue. You will note that we decreased our contribution of local revenue relatively substantially this year. If you look at the revenue page, which is the front of your line item budget, you'll notice in the local revenue, we've declined significantly from a contribution of $815,000 down to $270,000. That is because we've devoted a tremendous amount of E&D over the last several, excess and deficiency, and we need to now slow that down so that we can start to build it back up to the 5% that's allowable. So this is just a history of those changes. During those years, there have been givebacks in the form of assessment discounts. One time, it was based on the interest we were earning on the MSBA money we had on hand during the time. But we also have given, in one other, I think it was in the years FY 23 and 24, we did have decreases in the overall assessment that we charged our town. So usually we give that discount in the 4th payment. So this is the history. So going to what is the money used for? The 35% of the budget is going to the second most important people in our school, and that's our teachers, our vocational and our academic teachers who are in front of our students. And then you see the other areas are in insurances and benefits
and plant and operations, which I will get into a little deeper. So, and then it declines from there. One area I think is important to note is retiree benefits, and I have a slide that goes a little deeper into that as well, but it's 5% of this overall budget. Those are people who don't work for us, and that is becoming an ever larger portion of this budget. These are people who have retired from our district, and primarily that's the cost of their health and dental insurance. This is just a table showing the same percentages of the overall budget. So you see the areas we talked about. I'll get into more detail as I start to collapse the budget. So as it collapses salaries, start to see what's driving this budget. It is a 5.68% budget overall. But this 58, you'll see that the salaries are overall decreasing as an overall percentage of the budget, very small, but benefits are going down by 1.3%. Don't take that as health insurance went down. That's, I think it's a 6.5% increase for the Cape Cod Municipal Health Group that we are a member of. I will also get into this. We are decreasing our contribution to OPEB for the reasons I'll say as I move along here. So that's really that decrease in our OPEB contribution, which I'll discuss in a minute. See materials and services. That's going up over 0.5% from the previous year. And as we come out of warranty on a lot of the systems in our building, service contracts take their place. And I don't think I need to talk about the inflation. It was alluded to in the previous presentations in maintaining buildings. And those service contracts have been substantial. Transportation is also going up considerably. This is a good, bad news situation. We have a new 5-year contract with Cape Destinations in FY26, and you're seeing the increase, the total increase reflected in this slide for a fiscal year. So it went from $895,000 for regular transportation of 11 buses for a year to $1,069,000. That number will stay the same in the next 4 years because it's a fixed contract. So we're absorbing it all in 1 year. So that's a driver of this 5.68% budget, but that will alleviate in the next 4 years. Those are the three driving areas, or two driving areas. And then I would say also insurances, and I'm not talking about health insurance now, I'm talking about property and liability insurances have gone up. We were under budgeted in 25, and then the increases in 26 are why they've become another 0.5% of the overall budget for this fiscal year. So this really just shows that more clearly, I hope, with the salaries accounting for 5.46% of the budget. And I don't want to undersell that. That is a substantial amount of money. Our collective bargaining agreements were 2.5%, 3.25%, 3.25% with our 4 unions. However, within that, there was more. There was changes within salary schedules. This collective bargaining season was exceedingly difficult and rich and challenging. But we are settled with all of our unions and our non-union and administrative personnel. But the increases were far beyond just 2.5%, 3.25%, 3.25% when you look into the other compensations that changed. For example, I'll just give one example for the teachers. We dropped the first 2 steps in the salary schedule for teachers. So now step 3 is step 1 and so forth. So you see the benefits decrease again. I will explain that. You see the materials and services change by 11.89, so considerably over the 5.68 overall budget increase for the reasons I talked about. Also transportation, and then utilities and heating to a lesser extent, but still a driver. And then the general insurances, once again, that's your property and liability. I think we're seeing that at home, and we're seeing it at Cape Cod Tech too. We did decrease our capital budget, which is really the last 4 line items in our budget, which are called building improvement, new equipment, replacement equipment, and technology and software. So we did make a small cut to that area. Then just as further collapsing it, that salaries and benefits overall are 78.6 of the overall budget. Materials and service, 8.3. I want to say that's flipped, by the way. I think
course.
that's a
Nothing goes
misprint.
down.
It's because it's not consistent with what I've said. So 78.6, 78.4 is a FY26 number. I apologize for that. And going down, all for the same reasons I've talked about before, just grouping expenses into larger bunches. So I'm going to stop there. That is the operating budget. I'm going to go on to the debt if you'd like me to, but I would entertain
Why don't we
questions.
stop there for just a moment? Does anyone in the public have any questions? I don't see any hands up. Anyone on the board?
No.
I had a quick question, or maybe it's an observation. What kind of renewable energy do you have on the plant?
So we currently have about 1% on our roof that was part of the building project.
Yeah.
And we are working with Select Energy right now, although the financials currently are not attractive. So we're in a waiting pattern on a
Right.
canopy
Makes
over our,
sense.
a canopy over our bus compound,
Okay.
which will be a sizable installation, but we need the financials to change.
Smart should be out soon.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah. And then I did some math that probably is faulty, but if we look at the budget from DY and we look at the budget from the tech school and we divide it by the students, we're paying about $13,000 or $13,600 per student at DY, about $27,000 per student at the tech school. Richard's going, my math isn't so bad. Good. So that's just an observation.
Yeah,
Standard for
I won't go into why I'd quarrel with the delta between those two numbers, because I can only defend one of them, and our number is correct.
Yeah.
But
Vocational,
technical,
technical
yeah.
education is more expensive. We've got 2 educations going on. We have 15 programs with very expensive equipment that needs to be maintained and serviced and that kind of thing. But the analysis I've done on per pupil spending is not that significant. It's more in the 19 to
Yeah.
27, $20 to $27,000 range.
And then I don't know if it's Richard is.
Oh, no, if I could,
Yes.
when you compare K to 12 districts to a vocational technical 9 through 12 district,
Oh,
you
that's
really, it's really apples to oranges.
Yes, I understand.
I also need to note, we're transporting from Provincetown and Mashpee with students as opposed to just within a town or two, which also affects it.
Sorry, Richard.
Richard?
I was just also going to add, part of the reason that you're seeing these increases is also the amount of students being added to the campus. So one of the other analyses that I do is I look at the per pupil analysis and the compound annual growth rate over time of the per pupil cost. And it's 2.89. So on a per pupil basis over time, their costs are going up under 3% per pupil, which is excellent. The other thing that he didn't tout was his energy plan with the school buses. The fleet that has been acquired by the contractor is all
It's over
electric.
$20,000.
Vita, you need to
You
mute
have to
yourself.
wait until we call on you. Thank you.
Okay.
Is all, she, of course, I didn't hear the important word.
All of the new buses that the contractor has acquired are electric buses. This is the first fleet of all electric buses.
Wow.
Can't believe
A
you
little
missed
scared.
I know.
I know. Jeez, Liz.
Finally, something I want to hear.
Just a
You
little
should
bit.
have started your presentation with that.
Just a little about that. We do have diesel backups for the
Yeah.
first year. We are expecting bumps along the green road, shall I say. So, but we are excited.
Awesome.
And it was definitely influenced by financials as well, in looking for a 5-year contract.
Excellent. And I did notice that special needs, it seems to be a cost, substantial cost in your, yeah, okay. And it's new, it seems like it's new,
No.
not
no,
particularly?
No.
All right, I shall leave it go.
Vita,
you're
did
talking
you-
about transportation for special
I
needs.
think that it
Yeah,
was-
that is,
yeah.
that is a particular situation
Yeah.
that has occurred that'll be there for about 4 years.
Oh, and the police liaison officer,
Yeah,
that went up a lot, too.
That was because the town of Harwich wanted, we used to make a kind of a token contribution of $20,000, but it was brought forth by some citizens in Harwich, we should be paying more for the police officer who we would never give up. So we now pay 60 rather than $20,000.
That'll do it. Okay, thank you.
Vita, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Did someone give a figure of 13,000 plus or something for student expenditure in Yarmouth in this when this presentation was made? And not the people presenting, but somebody from the Board of Selectmen. I thought we've been having about 20,000 plus in the last several years per student. So where did that 13,000 come from?
Do you want me to answer it, or shall I let it go, Madam Chair?
Well, let's have Liz answer, but we'll really, that kind of question, you want to wait until we actually are on the DY school budget to get an exact answer to it, Vita.
Well, I mean, I'm just because it was brought up by somebody on the board, and I thought, where
Liz,
did
how
they
did you
get
come
that?
up with your math?
So Vita, it was really taking the total budget from both of the schools and dividing by the total number of students. And the math I have been, as part of this conversation, it's fuzzy math. It's not real accurate. It's very much of an approximation. Should not be taken
Well,
literally.
Can I suggest something? There's Dee's has a big table that's available. It wouldn't be of that particular year, but it's only maybe a year or so behind. And they give you a per student expenditure that they come up with.
Also, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay, thank you.
Also, you could have been taking our budget divided by the total number of students, but the students aren't all ours, so you have to add Dennis's budget to that.
That's right, yep.
So
Fuzzy,
There you go.
fuzzier and fuzzier.
Okay, moving on to your next
So
part.
the debt, so I can't believe it, we're already in the 7th year of paying off the school in a 20-year debt schedule, which is, as you can see, a declining debt schedule. Moving to the capital debt for the town of Yarmouth for next fiscal year, it's $1,142,732. And then the operating assessment is $2,689,748. And then the total for the town of Yarmouth is those two numbers put together for $3,832,480. And then finally, we did decrease, I talked about how we decreased our OPEB contribution. Our finance subcommittee came up with a plan to fully fund other post-employment benefits, which is primarily health insurance for retirees and dental insurance. We have a 28-year plan. We're 2 years ahead of it. So rather than making other decisions for FY26, that 90,000 number was $300,000. We had been inching that up in our plan and got to 3, and we were going to keep it at 3. The situation this fiscal year, we felt that with being ahead of our schedule, because of the gains that we've realized in the Plymouth County OPEB trust that we joined several years ago, we're take a dip here in FY26 and then slowly inch it back up to try to get back on track in the outgoing fiscal years. We also look in that plan, it assumes that the Barnstable County assessment, which is also in this budget, which is about $500,000, which is attempting to fully fund that retirement system. When that becomes fully funded, we would be adding, we wouldn't take it out of our budget. Of course, that'll be somebody else's problem. It would go on into that schedule and fully fund OPEB. And I think we had it at 2040.
Okay, I don't see any questions from the public. Any questions from the board?
I just had one question. Sure. Now, this may be something that's handled with the new building, which is wonderful. But when you had 600 students and then you added 81, where do you put them?
In the attic. No.
I didn't see an attic.
No, so we were built for 650. When they do that, they say it's about 85% utilization. So you can assume that we can put another 15%, and then you can be a little creative after that. We're not at that point right now. When we get to about 720, that's when we need to say enough's enough. And we are exploring a satellite campus, which I think I talked about last year. And Mark, I forgot pictures again. I forgot pictures again. I remember from last year, I forgot pictures. So it's at 374 Main Street. We're actively fundraising. We're not looking for the towns to pay for any of the capital costs associated with that project. It would bring on 2 new programs when we're able to do that. Currently saying September of 26, which is not this budget, but the 27 budget. But there's a lot of fundraising to do, a lot of hurdles to go over to start environmental technology and veterinary science on that property.
Wonderful.
It's 33 acres. We pay the whopping sum of a lease of $1,000 a year for the property as we investigate trying to do this programming. It also our horticulture program will benefit from this. Because I heard a lot about natural resource management prior, and kids, that's part of the environmental program to learn about natural resource management.
Which town?
It's in Harwich. It's
374 Main
same
Street.
town as where we're located.
Oh, thank you. That's
But as more comes down
Good
the road,
news.
I'll certainly be sharing more.
Tracy, you had a question?
I just have one question not related to this budget, but I don't know. We've been following the potential for the lottery. Where can you talk a little bit about that, how that could affect?
Yeah, I've been intimately involved with that. Every month, about 15 superintendents from vocational schools are going up to the Board of Ed. They're going to, on March 10th, March 10th, they're going to propose regulations to institute a qualified lottery that only takes into account attendance and very, very severe discipline, which is the case now with our admissions policy. We currently have an admissions policy where all the students from our district apply to us. We get their attendance records, we get their grades, 7th and 8th grade. They're disciplined, but typically it doesn't apply as a demotion, as a 10-point deduction if there's a severe discipline. And then there's a personal interview, and then there's a counselor recommendation from the sending school. That's the current policy, and that's the way it's been since I've been at the school. But the state, in particular the Healy administration, feels that is inequitable, and we want to maintain at least some admission standards for the school because. We are trying to train a lot of our students. Some do go on to further education, but many go right into the workforce. And the best ability is availability. And if you're not in school and you're not in work, you're not going to keep a job and you're not going to graduate. So we think attendance is important. And discipline we certainly think is important. As I say, it's severe discipline, and there's not a lot of applicants that applies to. But they're around equipment that can hurt people. And then the interview is our ability to get the sense of whether they're even interested. Why are they interested in coming to Cape Cod Tech? Only attendance, discipline, and interest are even on the radar for a lottery. There could be any one of those. It could be a lottery, blind lottery. Any student that applies is in the lottery, or some sort of admission criteria that would only rule them out of the lottery. Keep in mind, with an admissions policy, there's a score. There will be no more scores, and so once you have the students that are qualified for the lottery kind of similar to a charter school, the numbers are picked, and you go from there.
Yeah,
I would like to note that the fact is that the school committee has been very concerned about this for a number of years, and had actually done a lot of work on the whole admissions policy because we wanted to make sure we were not excluding students because of some past isolated event or something like that. And so that including even the interview and things like that has led to indeed having a group of very committed students, and we're not excluding kids. We've actually lowered some of the grade things we used to have and things like that, and it's been a process for at least several years now with multiple school committee members working on that. So the policy that we have currently, I think, is very, very equitable. We do have kids who really want to be there, which is very important. And I think, as Bob said, they're working around equipment and getting OSHA certified and everything. That whole liability policies and things like that, you have to be very, very careful about them. I mean, they're working on auto mechanics, they're working with heavy farm equipment, they're working with a variety of things that they need to be there, learning the lessons every day, and then following rules. If they say, teacher tells you don't go there, you're not going to say, who can you to tell me? And so it's been a real process so I think the entire school committee is very distressed about the idea of going to a general lottery.
Yeah, I think, as Liz pointed out, vocational education is expensive. And it's a privilege. Should that privilege be expanded to more students? Absolutely. I'm very thrilled to see that you're potentially expanding that to give more people the opportunity. But I am a little bit concerned about the criteria of a lottery and how it's going to impact your budget. We see, well, I don't want to get into that's another question, but potentially that's something that this board could maybe write a letter or at least have a discussion about to see if we could write a letter or take a position on that in the future. But I'm excited that you're going to expand and offer it to more people. I am a little concerned with what that means to your budget. Not that it should be put all in the public schools, but a lot of the resources are there already for a lot of the things. So when you spread that out even more, we're going to be duplicit in a lot of our programs. And as pointed out, it's expensive. So if you don't have the potential to utilize that and you're not committed to it, I'm not sure that the taxpayers should fund that for you. So anyway, I'd love for us to talk about that at some point.
I will point out in the early 70s, I was an educator, and basically the technical schools were a dumping ground. If you couldn't make it in high school, that's where you went, and that's become very, very different now because our kids do go on to careers, college, and other, because they're really well educated when they go. Sorry. Thank you.
No, it's true. My parents didn't want me to go to Cape Cod Tech, but I was there. I was happy. I was smoking my Marlboro Lights on the bus. And I think about these days
They don't do that
now.
anymore.
No, they don't do that anymore. So
Not on my bus.
500 feet of school, right?
it's just a different world.
Okay, well, I see no further questions. Thank you very much. Very
I
informative
had one further
presentation.
comment. I wanted to state to you that I'm obviously a retired educator who is responsible for zero-basing multiple million-dollar department. And I have to say that the work that Bob and both Aaron Orcott do is an amazing job in terms of really the attention to detail within the budget and very careful scrutiny. And a lot of the materials and things that you've seen tonight are things that we get on a monthly basis that are discussed by the full school committee and really monitored. And in addition to that, besides the technical part of what's going on, I do need to sort of compliment Bob and everyone within that school building. Our MCAS scores exceeded scores here on Cape Cod for other schools, and including exceeded state growth this year. And so that what we have are a group of very, very hardworking teachers who are not just in the trades, but are also looking at the academic issues. And one of the most incredible presentations that I saw several months ago was by our director of curriculum, during which time they had actually sat down as departments and looked at the individual MCAS results from students, took a look at the patterns of where the learning was, where the problems had been in terms of the scores and things, then sat and talked about our curriculum to match an improvement within the curriculum. And we also offer after-school classes. We have a video screen in the hallway. You can know which room to go to and which teacher is providing support, academic support services every afternoon after school, so that they're not just getting the work within the technical part, but they're actually getting a very full education. And it's really under the leadership of some pretty incredible things. But the school committee is really, really kept informed about all of this. So what you're seeing tonight is not just a one-off to sort of come and impress the Yarmouth Board of Selectmen or a town meeting. It's something that takes place on a monthly basis, really, for all of the full school committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, before we leave, and before Bob leaves, I just wanted to commend him and your team on this new initiative that you're doing, this new satellite campus that you're developing. And I think, quite frankly, it offers a good excuse to come back in the near future so that we can get an update. They're doing some very exciting things out there, and I think the more we're aware of this effort and the offerings that are going to be laid out there, I think, quite frankly, there'd be a lot of interest and support here in Yarmouth for what you're trying to do. People might think it's in Harwich, but it's going to provide a valuable core set of programs and services that will be of interest to all students here on Cape Cod.
To Tracy's point, though, I don't want to. I want to raise the funds outside of the capital funds outside. I would be coming to this board for the teachers and the supplies in the future if this does come to fruition.
Yeah, but I'm raising this because I think it's just it's important to raise the awareness.
Yes.
I'm
happy to come back
and the thing is, I think there's a benefit to coming to a community like ours and raising awareness, because I think there is support in the community for what you're trying to do.
Thank you.
All right? So I think that it's worth coming here and showing the flag and sort of talking a little bit about what you're doing, because it's very exciting. And I do think there'll be community support here. Yeah, and Chris will be here, too, to weigh in.
Best
as well.
cheerleader for the school.
She is. She is. And once again, your budget, you always do a great job on the budget. It's a very easy one to endorse and support, and I'm sure we'll be doing that in the days ahead.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now we have the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District.
You must be sick of looking at us.
Please.
Well, we'll take a, no, never mind.
For the very few who may not know who you are, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Mark Smith, Superintendent, Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District. It's nice to be back again. Had the pleasure of zipping across the Bass River Bridge. I was in your meeting with your colleagues across the river earlier for their select board meeting. Happy to be back again tonight. So Mr. Rittenauer and I had a conversation, and we have a truncated version of the presentation I gave yesterday, or not yesterday, sorry.
Last week.
Time's a flat circle. Yeah, last week. So not to go through the entire presentation, I can go back over any of the same information. I have all of that sort of here in my folder that I've been growing over the set of meetings. But again, I don't have all of the same level of detail in this presentation as in the last presentation, because I was just here last week. But and the board should hopefully still have the budget detail that you had that I provided last week, and that the finance committee has been provided as well. So, as I mentioned last time, it's all driven by our strategic plan. In the budgeting process this year, we have 3 large objectives. We launched our strategic plan this year. It's a 5-year plan. We have 3 major goals. One is to eliminate disparities in our academic achievement. And as I mentioned last time, this is the overall picture is to raise student achievement for all students. As we dug into the data over the last year plus, it's really, we have a student achievement issue across the entire district that needs work. And then B, as we dig closer into that, there are some students who are being underserved by the district. So it's like a 2-pronged approach. And we have several initiatives that are geared towards that. Second piece is around establishing better systems for how we operate as a district. I know I talked about this last time I was here, but as an organization, we're roughly 630 employees, somewhere between an organizational size of Cape Cod 5 and Nantucket Airlines. And so we can operate more efficiently and effectively as a school district, from standard operating procedures on how we make decisions as a district, from the budget building process and how we operate with the towns and understand the needs of the towns, to how we operate internally, payroll, accounts payable, et cetera, to consistent processes. I've said sometimes as a district, we operate as like 6 different fiefdoms between the 6 different schools, where we need to be more unified across the schools, et cetera. And the last is, which is already mentioned a little bit here today, prior to me coming up, is having we operate 152 acres of taxpayer property and a little over 600,000 square feet of taxpayer property. So we need to have a long-term capital plan, which includes those facilities' needs over the next 5 to 10 years, and keep updating that. As soon as next year happens, we'll have to add to the 10th year, right? So we need to get that first plan in place, and then have something that we continue to build off of and work with, what's pieces that we'll be able to fund with our current funding mechanisms, what's parts that we're going to have to work with the towns, but be able to come prepared. And you all have a system for capital funding, and Dennis has a system for capital funding. So we need to work within both those systems appropriately. Too many computers. Here's where we are in the process. The school committee met last night and did vote their final budget. I do have a slight update to provide to the board based upon that vote last night. I'll get to that when we get to the end. There were factors that drove the overall budget. As I mentioned, the strategic plan is one of them. As Dr. Sanborn mentioned, collective bargaining does tend to drive a lot of our we're a people business. We were fortunate going into this year that all 3 of our major contracts were already settled. So we knew those numbers way back at the beginning of the year when we started some of the initial intermunicipal meetings. Our service contracts were already settled. Our transportation contract, our janitorial service contract, those were already all settled. So we knew what those increases were. Contracted services were largely settled. The one thing that's been an escalator has been our out-of-district special education's tuitions and transportation costs, as well as costs associated with McKinney-Vento. I know we talked about that a lot last time I was here. And then obviously the most important things that most important service we provide are our students. So student need always drives our costs as a district. And then we have level funded the supply lines as a district. So staffing levels over time, you can see this is showing the 35.5 staff reduction last year going into the year. And this shows where we fall out as a school district compared to other school districts. I explained this a lot last year, but largely this shows we don't have really any more staff or any less staff on average than in these major groupings. There are some districts that have a little bit more than us, some districts that have a little bit less than us when you compare us by demographics and by relative wealth. And I've talked about our enrollment. I would keep talking about this. We're the only, I meet with the other Cape superintendents every month. Other than the Dr. Sanborn and his colleague up at Upper Cape Tech, because they operate a little bit differently. But like the public school districts, we're the only public school district on the Cape that has this trend. Maybe Nantucket has a trend a little bit like this as well, although she's a little bit more stable, where you're seeing the opposite of what everybody else is seeing, where everybody else is seeing declining enrollment except for DY. And this is now going on a 5-year trend where our enrollment is increasing. And this is, again, the students that are walking in the door every day. This is different than the foundation enrollment, but it is the students that are walking in the door. And last time I checked the numbers, right prior to February break, it was 3,120 students. I'm going to skip past this slide because this one explains it a little bit more. I did show that slide in the last time. The students that make up this group, these are our largest student population groups. Largest student population groups are students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and I mean, the ones that are gaining in percentage are students that are socioeconomically disadvantaged and our first language not English students. Additionally, we've seen an increase over the last 12 years of our students who are actively English language learners. And then we talked about this slide a lot last time I was here as well, which is that the percentage of students, our out-of-district costs, the blue is the tuition costs, the orange is the transportation costs. Those costs continue to escalate. The tuitions, we don't set the tuitions, actually set by a consortium in the state, and that it was a big 17% spike between 22 and 23, which is why you see that big bump between 22 and 23. And transportation, we've had this conversation. We'll see it on this next slide too when we talk about McKinney-Vento transportation costs. Our biggest challenge is the supply of vendors on the Cape. There just aren't any, so we have to bring a lot of transportation vendors from off Cape. While I appreciated the comment made before about the fact that we don't have to transport from kids from Mashpee to Provincetown and et cetera, but we have to send kids to Plymouth, and we have to send kids to Bridgewater, and a lot further for out-of-district transportations and for students who are unsheltered. And we have to oftentimes get transportation from off Cape to come on Cape to pick those students up, to then bring them off Cape to their off Cape placements. So that transportation gets very, very expensive. So again, it's not to say our challenges are better or worse, they're just different. I don't think I gave the abbreviated slide deck because I'm looking at all the same slides. So I'm just going faster. So I discussed the priority rubric the last time. This is how we determined our priorities for the what to move forward to the school committee. The school committee ultimately voted to move these these items forward, the items that were listed as a 4 or a 3 on our priority rubric. The top 4 were ones that were either items that were priority 4 were the robotics one was things that we had been previously paying for every year, we just never budgeted. So we have a strong robotics program, been in place for years. At the high school, we always find the money somehow to pay for the supplies that are needed for that program, but we actually are budgeting for it for this year. The next 2 are contracted, settled stipends with one of our bargaining units. The next is game officials. That rate is set by the MIAA, so the referees that show up at games. That rate increase was set by MIAA. And then I mentioned this last time I was here. We've had, for whatever reason, a spike of enrollment at second grade in particular at ME Small. We haven't added a teacher this year. We've gone over our class size standards for second grade. So when those students move up to third grade, we're going to balance that back out by adding a third grade teacher next year at ME Small. And then the priority 3 items, which the school committee has supported, is an ELE director to support that increase over the last 10 years in the students whose first language is not English and the students who are active English language learners. I do not have anybody in my leadership team who's in charge of that. I keep using the same analogy, I just used it in Dennis. It would be like operating a wastewater program without a wastewater supervisor, or having a fire department without a fire chief, or having a recreation department without a recreation director. I have a significant portion of my student body, a significant portion of staff that support that student body without anybody who's in charge of leading that department. So this is putting somebody in that leadership position. And then the remaining items all support our strategic plan. The Thought Exchange is a tool we use for gathering input from our school community. It's AI supported, allows us to take survey data and analyze it and give us feedback so we can respond back to our parents, to our staff, to students. And then ArcSed is a tool that we'll use for negotiation. They gather contracts from across, and because we start negotiations next year, so they gather contract information from all groups that have settled contracts and let you know, like, this is what was the rate that was agreed upon in this neighboring district, and these were the benefits for family medical leave that were, so that you know sort of what the field is agreeing to. MTA always comes armed with this information. We normally aren't armed with this information, so it'll help us be more level set in the negotiations. And then the last is we're working over multiple years on replacing and updating the foreign language or world language textbooks at the high school. So last year, I always invert these, so I can't remember which we did. I think we did French this year, and we're doing Spanish next year. I might have those inverse.
You do. Mr. Simon's back there.
Yeah, it's the other way around. All right. And then the last are all budget neutral. They're just, it was informing the school committee about changes in staffing that we're making, but we're moving the FTEs. They don't have a budget impact. And then these were all not funded. These were priority 2 and 1 that were not in the budget. The punchline is a 4.496% budget increase to the operating budget. The debt have an update from a vote the school committee took last night, so that debt number is actually going to change slightly, which I'll talk about when we get to the assessment in a minute. But the operating budget did not change when the school committee took a vote last night. So the 4.49% increase did not change from last night. However, the debt service number did change last night. So again, I will update that when we get to the assessment in just a minute. All right. So again, there are a couple of factors. We talked about this last time I was here. We've seen increased state aid over the last several years. Our foundation enrollment, part of the things that we need to consider is the 5-year rolling average. So that's where they settle out this year, is 30.668 to your Carna parts across the river and 69.332 to Yarmouth. And that's sort of just how it's looked over time, which you can see, if you go back about 10 years, it was about a 65-35 split, and it's moved almost to a 70-30 split at this point in time. Which then brings us to the process of assessment. So we start with the state aid, move to the minimum required contribution, and then the last bit is that roughly 30-70 split. And I know I slowed down a little bit here last time, and I gave the board some examples on this. And I'm just going to slow down a little bit more here just for those who are in the public and weren't watching last time, because I really think this is important. I stressed it because it impacted Dennis more this year on the minimum required contribution. So the minimum required contribution is the biggest factor in the assessment. So this year, the minimum required contribution for, and again, folks always, and it's a fair question, why does the minimum required contribution matter? Both towns pay above the minimum. Yes. And the minimum required contribution is the first step in the assessment. It's the first chunk of money that we are required as a regional district to assess the towns first. And that number is set by the Department of Ed, set by the governor's budget, comes from DOR. We get that as the first chunk that we have to assess. And usually that number goes up. Sometimes there has been times where it's gone down. But over the last several years, that number's gone up. It almost never goes up proportionately. in meaning that each town's number goes up by the same percentage. This year, Yarmouth's percentage increase of their minimum required contribution was 6.125%, and Dennis's was 8.445%. That's the first chunk of money that comes off. And then there's a remaining amount. That remaining amount is what gets split by this 30.668, I've already lost that number, basically the 70-30 split. So that bottom of the teeter-totter is the first part. And I showed the committees, so then when you add the remaining amount, then when you average that together, it's where you get the total assessment increase. I gave the board, different governing models. You're not a committee, you're a board. Although you're small C committee, big B board. I gave you all some examples last time I was here, is if you had all gone up proportionately to your counterparts across the river, the assessment increases, if both had gone up, both the minimum required contributions had gone up by 6.125%, nothing had changed about our operating budget. Your Yarmouth's assessment increase at the end, when you run all the math back down, would have been a 3.7% increase, and Dennis's would have been a 3.46% increase. And then if it had been inverse, if y'all had had a bad year and your assessment increase, your minimum required contribution had gone up instead by 8.44%. So this, wrong slide. Nope, this way. This first piece, that 8.445% had been on your side, then your assessment increase would have been 4.17%, and Dennis's would have been 2.46% when you ran it all out. And nothing changed about the operating budget for the district.
Right.
Right? So the minimum required contribution, again, is a significant factor when you get down to the assessment piece. Again, too many clicks, or too many things for me to click. So this is, again, those were just fictional scenarios, because that's not ultimately what happened. This is ultimately what happened this year. But this also shows it over time. So last year, not only were we dealing with a difficult budget challenge, you all also had the larger minimum required contribution increase. So it's why Yarmouth was not only dealing with the challenge that we were all dealing with, you also had a larger proportionate minimum required contribution increase, which when we ran out the whole formula meant Yarmouth was carrying a larger portion of the assessment weight last year. This year, it's affecting your comrades across the river. And the year before that, in 2024, and the year before that, in 2023, it was in Dennis. Nope, that's not. So that brings us to the debt service, and this number has changed. I have it in my notes here. So last night, the school committee took a vote, and the school committee decided to use $416,150 from E&D to pay the last high school bond payment. So that changes the total debt service. So that first debt service payment that would have been required from the town of Yarmouth is no longer required. So when you do the math, as long as I did my math correctly, the new total debt service payment for Yarmouth for this year would be $2,388,423, as opposed to the number you see on the screen there.
So it's less than 253,623.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Like that.
And that brings me to the end. I know I spoke fast. It's because I apparently didn't send my shortened slides. And I was going over all the same ones. Oh, and before I finished, just so that I know you heard him speak before, but our school committee liaison for Yarmouth is on with me as well, Joe Glenn. I just wanted to make sure we recognize that I had a school committee member here as well.
I want to just give an opportunity to any of the public if they have any questions. I'm not seeing any hands up. If you do have a question, you need to raise your hand for us. I don't see any questions from the public. We had an ample opportunity last week to answer questions. Are there any further questions?
I have 2 questions.
Okay.
One question is, what is your per pupil cost?
Hello.
Okay, so you did have a question, Vita. I wondered, but your hand wasn't up.
I had my hand raised, but you didn't see it, I guess.
I guess not. Go ahead, Vita.
All right.
first.
So I've been unmuted now, right? Okay, so I have a question going back to the student population, a graph there that shows over a period of time what happens with the economically disadvantaged, the English language learners, the special ed. Then the last number, which is the last acronym, is FLNE. What does that stand for?
First language, not English.
Okay, so that's almost it. And at that very same graph, I think, shows that the yellow line we seem to be getting people that are causing the increase in that population. Total population seems to be the only one that is increasing all the time. So my question is going to be, where do these students come from?
From all over. We have somewhere in the ballpark of 22 to 25 different languages in the district.
But I mean, and all of them are brand new students. I mean, they're not coming from like choice or anything like that.
No, I mean you can see it's been an increase. So it's been a steady increase over from 12% in 2013-14 to 30%, or just under 30% now. So it's been increasing over time. So it's not like all of a sudden we had 0 and we went to 30%. So it's been an increase in students. So and it's not our school choice numbers are not they're steady as far as the number of students we are school choicing in. Historically, we haven't had a surge of school choice in students. These are students residing in both of our communities.
No, let me. But I can't increase the image of that graph. Where did that yellow line start going off, steadily increasing there? Was that 3 years ago, 4 years ago? When?
I mean, define steadily increased. It's from 13. It goes. If you start all the way back in 2013, it goes 12, 13, 14. 16, 17, 18, 20.
But it kind of increases, whereas the red line decreases. Where do they cross? I mean, at that point,
2019.
There's a major increase, and it's the only one that keeps increasing. All the others are decreasing.
No.
I don't know. I guess I would argue. I would say the economically disadvantaged has stabilized at between 55.
Well, it was at one point, and now it's decreasing. So. My question, I guess, is going to be if these are the non-English speaking, come from non-English speaking families, are any of these the recent arrivals, the illegal aliens?
As a school district, we don't.
Of course.
Our job isn't to check for immigration status, and students whose first language is not English can be a bilingual student. Part of our challenge as a school district is we're responsible for translating under state statute into the home language. So if the student speaks more than one language, because you have two different groups there, right? So you have the light blue line on the bottom, which is the English language learner. So those are students who are actively receiving English language instruction to learn the English language. So that student is native language is not English. So they could be in both those groups. Those students are going to be in both those groups. But the reason you see a disparity between those two numbers is you have students who maybe started as an English language learner. Maybe they arrived with us in kindergarten or second grade or third grade, and their first language was not English when they first arrived, and they moved through our English language learner program and mastered English, and now they speak more than one language. But their first language was not English. And at home, perhaps the native language spoken at home maybe is.
Because I have a couple of other questions. Is this the graph that shows these so-called as a group, that these students constitute 2/3 of the population of the enrollment?
So that is, whoops, sorry.
I don't talk about yellow, I'm talking about as a
I
group.
know, I'm trying to get to that slide. So that's this slide. So this slide is that group, all of those factors together, the department creates this group called high needs. So students can be in any one of those four categories. So you could be a student that's special education and an English learner, or special education and economically disadvantaged, or three of those four, or all four of those four. And if you hit any one of, or a combination of those four categories, you're identified by the Department of Education as high needs. And that's what makes up this graph that you're seeing here.
This is that one that comes up at 67%, is that
Correct.
it?
Yep.
Because I can't see on my,
Yes, yeah.
Is there any other district on the Cape that approaches that kind of a number, that kind of a percentage?
I don't know their exact numbers, but I do know we're not the only district that's in and around this ballpark.
I don't want to step on Dr. Smith's line, but I have actually looked at all of the data. This is available on the Mass DOE site, and our situation is this district's situation is very similar to other districts, not only in the Cape, but across the Commonwealth.
Well, somewhere off the Cape, I wouldn't be surprised, especially in the large cities. But an area like the Cape, it seems very, anyway, all I can say is, in general, that when that Student Opportunity Act collapses and goes away, are we going to be, we're going to be in some kind of a situation. But we're just not going to get that kind of reimbursement from the state. And I think somebody had better start thinking about what we will need to be doing. Because where we're going on as though this is going to go on forever. And it is definitely, the way the state is going, is probably going to go bankrupt anyway. And that's going to go away. And you better start thinking, I think, of what you're going to do when that goes away. Thank you.
Thank you, Vita. Tracy?
I just want to know what the per pupil cost is, and I want to just make a couple of comments to say, first of all, I appreciate the work that you did with the towns, and I know we happen to not be on the receiving end of the higher number this particular year, but there's no doubt it flips and it goes back and forth. So I appreciate the work that you did with the committee to utilize the E&D to try to bring their assessment down. And I just wondered if you, and I know you're really busy, but if you had the opportunity to ever look at other districts that have an agreement that utilizes some mechanism that levels out those peaks. That was always kind of like the challenge that we were up against. And, we try to renegotiate at one point in time to do the 5-year rolling average to try to, level that highs and lows out. But is there anybody who uses a mechanism that gets to the contribution from the state or other ways to try to level that?
So I'd have to do some research. The district that I came from, this was it's a 2-town district. So when you're in multiple towns, it isn't at like
Levels
it
itself.
levels itself
Yeah.
out a little bit better when it's across 3 or more towns. But when it's 2, it's a bigger impact. and I'm somebody who understands the math a little bit better. If I sat down, if I had a little bit more time to like run some scenarios, I'd probably be able to explain it a little bit better. But I just know from my regional colleagues who are in multi-town districts. Well, I mean, we're a multi-town, but you know, like 3 or more. For whatever reason, the minimum required contribution doesn't affect as much when you're in 3 or more. Bless you. But anyways, so the district that I came from, this was the same, and for like multiple years, it was always hitting the same town. So I only know that, and that experience is the same as this one, right? And because this is the statutory method, right? So a lot of regions are set up this way. But so the short answer is no, I don't. But I'm happy to
It'd be
spend some
interesting
time
to spend some time after the budget season's over. I know you're busy now, but
I'm part of like a regional schools network, so I'm happy to sort of put it out on that listserv and see, and collect and see, you know, are there other.
So for years, we were playing with not using the statutory. We actually had a different mechanism at one point in time. We weren't using the statutory. And then when the budget would be proposed, we would look at both ways for some time before we chose this one. But, you know, again, I feel bad for Dennis this year. I'm grateful for the work that you did to try to mitigate that for them as much as you can, and all work together. So I think it's great going forward, but there's more to come on that, unfortunately. Thank you.
And then when the conversation came up before, I hopped on the Department of Ed's website. So it lags a little bit. Somebody made the comment. I think it might have been Vita who made the comment. It lags a little bit on the Department of Ed's websites, but I did go and look it up real quick. So our per pupil expenditure based upon the Department of Ed's website. So this was, I think, fiscal 23. And I just moved away from it to get you that information, was 22,863. Then I think the conversation before was, I think you were using the numbers based on the assessment, right?
Yep.
Sort of, yeah, right. I will say it's still lower than my I'm not going to give you his number, but yeah, that's the number, is 22,863, based upon, you know, again, it lags a little bit, but.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Smith. No other questions? No? Thank you very much. We really appreciate your taking the time with us.
Have a great night.
Thank
As
you.
well.
Okay, with the end of the Dennis Yarmouth Regional School District, we come to the end of the public hearing on budget and capital plan. So we can assume that the Finance Committee and Capital Budget Committee are now
The Capital Budget Committee, or the Finance Committee is adjourned.
are adjourned. Okay.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much. So we're moving on our agenda. We have the Cape Cod Chamber presentation, Tourism Marketing District.
Stay a while.
Okay. Great. Good evening. I'm Paul Niedzwiecki. I'm the CEO of the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. Joining me is our chair of the board. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Lisa Oliver. I'm the chairpresident and CEO of the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod, and currently this year's chair of the board of the chamber.
And we also have Katie Atchison, our executive director of our Blue Economy Foundation, in the room with us tonight. We really appreciate the time. We know this is a really busy time of year, so we appreciate you're getting us in here in front of you to talk about what's known in Massachusetts as a tourism destination marketing district that we'd like to create in the town of Yarmouth. Across the country, they're known as tourism improvement districts. They're really built on a business improvement district model. So just to kick it off, we're here to introduce the concept tonight. and we'll run through it as quickly as we can. So traditional funding for tourisms are either private or public. Some of the private setups are memberships, partnerships, grants, event revenue, contract services, licensing, naming rights, things like that. The public sources are federal or state grants, especially federal grants during the COVID times, untethered tax allocations, tethered tax allocations, property tax increment financing, sales tax increment financing, and assessments. And so the Tourism Improvement District and the TDMD in Massachusetts is an assessment. So when we talk about tourism funding, it's really about sufficiency and funding stability. Tourism on the Cape in 2023 generated $2.7 billion in visitor spend. It's responsible directly for over 14,000 jobs on the Cape, and it generated almost $250 million in taxes, 80 million of those taxes back to the 15 towns on the Cape, over 160 million up to the Commonwealth, which is certainly more than we get back in unrestricted local aid. Figuring out a way that we can fund this sufficiently and stably is really important to us. The Commonwealth has historically underinvested in tourism. Last year, I think we generated over $400 million in room occupancy tax. Only $10 million was reinvested back into tourism. Many states will divert 50%, but Massachusetts is really sort of lagging behind. Maine benchmarks their contribution to market the state for tourism to 5% of the occupancy tax, and the average among the 50 states is a $22 million investment. Massachusetts only puts in 10. So, do you have enough to competitively market your destination? How reliable are your funding streams, and can they be diverted? So the Tourism Destination Marketing District, it's a dedicated, stable source of funding designed to increase occupancy and revenue for hospitality businesses. The funds are raised through a small assessment that generates funds that are used to directly benefit the businesses that are paying the assessment in the community's districts. The TDMDs offer a level playing field. There are no free riders. This concept has a 5-year term, and it has to be renewed every 5 years. And we have to, as the Regional Tourism Council, demonstrate a return on investment directly to those properties that are paying the assessment. So the state does collect the tax for us through the Department of Revenue to provide additional oversight, transparency, and reliability. So the lodging businesses pay that assessment. It's collected by the state government, and it's managed by the Regional Tourism Council, which for Barnstable County is the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. So just some key elements of the TDMDs in Massachusetts. This is a relatively new concept for the Commonwealth. It was passed as part of the Economic Development Bill in 2021. It's really been used across the country for decades, over 30 years. So it's kind of new to us. But the purpose is to create an industry-led funding mechanism to support tourism promotion activities, assist with recovery. Funds raised are used to provide services directly by and directly benefiting the businesses in the district. Those services are supplemental services beyond standard government services, including marketing, sales activities, events, and other tourism and travel promotion activities. The enabling legislation, as I mentioned, is Chapter 40X in Massachusetts. The term, as I mentioned, is 5 years. The assessment rate by the legislation cannot exceed 2%. The formation, any city or town in the state can form a TDMD, or they can actually cross boundaries if one community chooses to be the lead community. As we'll get to, the only TDMD in the state that is operational right now is the TDMD between Boston and Cambridge, with Boston acting as the lead community. So the governance, the district will be managed by the Regional Tourism Council. The management entity shall then appoint a committee to implement TDMD services. A district marketing plan must be written and updated every 5 years, indicating the supplemental services and programs to be provided. And as a baseline, the municipality is required to maintain the provision of standard government services. So just like a bid, the funds raised here privately on particular properties can't be used to offset public expenses that are already being spent for tourism. So key elements in Massachusetts related to the collection. The assessed lodging businesses will pay the TDMD assessment to the Commissioner of Revenue. The DOR will then remit those assessments to the Regional Tourism Council. So it requires a petition process to initiate the district. The petition requires the signatures of 62% of the lodging business owners within a proposed TDMD, and we must file with the Office of the Clerk of the lead jurisdiction. So we're going to go on a town-by-town basis. We had initially looked at going Cape-wide, but there are over 190 hotels on the Cape in 15 different municipalities, and that was unmanageable to sort of to start off with. So we're going to go town by town, and pursuant to the plan, we've actually set a room limit of 85 rooms. So in order to qualify as a member, a participating member, you have to have 85 rooms. So in the town of Yarmouth, that's 12 hotels. So the renewal is every 5 years. The TDMD committee convenes to propose an updated marketing district plan. The TDMD shall be renewed if a majority of the TDMD members who have paid their assessments are present at the renewal meeting in person or by proxy to vote to renew the TDMD. There is a disestablishment clause as well. So it has to be renewed every 5 years, and the TDMD can be disestablished if proper procedure for renewal after a term of 5 years is not followed, or if there are other issues that pop up, like funds being misappropriated. So just to take a look at the evolution of tourism industry funding, there are traditional models we have out there, membership models, and bed tax. The terms bed tax, occupancy tax, rooms tax are used somewhat interchangeably here. But with those traditional models, there's no defined term. It does create a competitive inequality because some of these hotels pay a lot more than others, but receive the same services back. It allows for non-participating businesses really to get a free ride. There's an inability for long-term planning, and the resources are not proportionate to the economic impact. So the advantage of the TDMDs is there's a specific term and a plan. They're managed and approved by those that are paying the assessment. It requires a notice and a public hearing. There's legal accountability to the district plan based on the benefit to the tourism businesses. The TDMD funds cannot be diverted, and funding is stable and protected for investment long-term. Legal and political protections, and there are procedures to dissolve the district midterm if necessary. So just kind of looking at where we are right now, there is a political opportunity. Elected officials, they enacted 40X, I think recognizing that they were underinvesting in tourism and sort of challenging the 16 regional tourism councils in the Commonwealth to sort of step up through an assessment process. There have been significant declines in government revenue. Tourism was the #1 industry impacted during the pandemic, and we are starting to see not just a return to normal, but decreasing levels of support for tourism moving forward. It's an excellent timing to request sort of a policy decision and to advocate for stable long-term funding to support the recovery and the growth of regions like the Cape that depend on travel and tourism. So if we look at these TIDs across the country, on average, TIDs produce over a 2% lift in hotel room demand and almost a 5% lift in hotel room revenue. The TIDs really do drive economic impact. This comes from a study that looked at 29 cities that have TDMDs across the country and compared them to their competitors that did not have tourism districts. So where do they exist? This is a slide a little bit outdated. There are 2 more now, so I think we're up to 203 across the nation. The most recent on this one were Louisville, and Providence, Rhode Island was one of the last ones to come in. Newport, Rhode Island was one of the first ones to do this decades ago. So the annual amount raised in these districts can vary from just $10,000, which is a district that only has 1 hotel in it, I think it's in Minnesota, to the high of $41 million for a total of $462 million more than 462 million across the country in 20 states. So just to point out where the states are, the blue states have active tourism districts, and the orange states are considering tourism districts. So you can see the national shift towards this kind of operation. And if we focus in really on our competitors and just on the East Coast, you can see Portland, Maine is a fairly recent one. You got the Boston, Cambridge, Providence, Newport, and then down from Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. And this is our major catchment area for tourists as well. So if we look at briefly a couple of those case studies, just Providence, for example, Providence formed the 201st TID. They have a 2% assessment on lodging properties with 50 rooms or more. It's estimated to generate over $1.6 million for Providence. They're using it for convention trade and sports tourism marketing, international marketing and public relationships, incentives for strategic business support. As I mentioned, Newport, also very close. One of the older, I think it is the oldest tourism district in the country. And you can see, I mean, might be a little bit difficult to read up there, but the first numbers in yellow are numbers from September to December 2019. So that's really off-season for them. And you can see that the revenue generated off-season is approaching revenue generated during peak season. And that's in part because they can use this money to provide incentives and to sponsor events off-season to bring people here, which is taking advantage of the infrastructure that they have in Newport, just like we have here. On the Cape, when we build infrastructure, whether it's transportation infrastructure, wastewater infrastructure, we have to build for peak flow capacity. So we're really building for 2 months out of the year. Some more stats and ways that they've used it to drive engagement in Newport. And then taking a look at the Boston-Cambridge TDMD, Boston is clearly, they're a lot bigger than we are. We're probably about 10%. But the Boston tourism industry generates $22.6 million in economic impact. Oops. The wheel. There we go. And produces $850 million in state and local revenues. The occupancy tax revenue of $318 million in Boston, Cambridge, and supports 140,000 jobs. Because there are 14,000, they're 140. We're about 10%. So the TDMD was formed in August of 2021 with a 1.5% assessment. And so Boston has a destination marketing organization known as Meet Boston. You might see that on the floor of the Celtics games. They went from a $7.5 million organization to here it's 21, but really they're up over $30 million now. So they're really driving economic development up there. The Army-Navy game was sponsored through TDMD money. The FIFA World Cup that's coming next year is all TDMD money. So they're really making the most of it up there. And just take a look. They're bolstering visitation hotel occupancy. And this is a really recent thing. We're starting to see occupancy drop this year. I mean, January was off by over 10%, which is reason for concern. But Boston held steady. We're also starting to see international travelers. Boston's marketing hard on international travelers. We're starting to see some of them migrate towards Boston instead of the Cape. So they've been able to restore the leisure and hospitality hotel jobs, enhance neighborhood experiences, increase single property meeting sales and related spending. They've allowed for incentive and special projects fund, international visitation, and they're really resuscitating the hotel tax revenue for Boston, Cambridge, and the Massachusetts General Fund. So with those examples in mind, how would it work on the Cape? Just process-wise, we need at least 62% of the eligible businesses to sign a petition to form the TDMD. So of the 12 hotels that are qualifying in Yarmouth, all have agreed to participate in the assessment, and we have petitions from 10 of them. So we are at that point in the process. So that's why we're here tonight, to sort of introduce the concept, because when we file the petitions with the town clerk, it starts a 60-day window to have a public hearing on it. So the required notices for public hearing have to happen, and a hearing has to be held within 60 days of the petition filing, but no sooner than 30 days after the filing. So there's kind of a window there. And then the jurisdiction votes to authorize the formation of a request of a petitioning business. So that's sort of the process there. We have had for over 18 months now sort of a pre-formation steering committee of 7 of the hoteliers from across the Cape. That will translate into a TDMD committee. And so what we will do is we're going to make sure there are 9 communities on the Cape, 9 towns that could qualify for a total of 35 hotels. Yarmouth has the largest number of hotels at 12. Barnstable second with 10. Falmouth would be third with 5. So we will have on the larger TDMD committee, each town will be represented. And then from that committee, a majority of them have to actually sit on the board of directors at the Cape Cod Chamber of Commerce. For oversight purposes, that's where the Sales and Marketing Committee will be located. The Nominating Committee, the Audit Committee of the Chamber, and the Finance Committee will all be responsible for the oversight of the funds that come in. So the assessment rate that the pre-formation committee has put together is 1.5%. And the district plan that will be filed with the petition, so you can read in more detail, provides for 75% of the funds can be used for sales, marketing, destination development, and special events. 10% can be used for business practices and workforce initiatives. One of the other advantages here is that compared to the state money that we get every year, and we get about $500,000 to market the entire Cape, but there are a lot of restrictions on that. So if we wanted to use some of these funds to invest in, say, workforce housing initiatives, we could do that. There's a lot more flexibility. Or if we wanted to use them for other purposes. The plan also calls for 15% to be held for reserves and administrative purposes. So there are 4 key areas in the plan: public relations and marketing, group incentives, community development and events, and workforce housing. So that's where the spending will happen. One of the major concerns of the hotels, and really the business community in general, are the bridges, and we're looking at a 7 to 10 year rebuild of both bridges. It could be long, it could be 15 years, depending on when they start and how they're staggered. And the real concern of the business community is that people won't want to go to the Cape because they are going to be afraid of the traffic associated with the bridge replacement process. Even though the bridge replacement process are going to be replaced next to the existing bridges. So the traffic disruption of the new bridges will be less than the traffic disruption of the maintenance that occurs on the old bridges. But that's not going to be clear to everybody. And so somebody needs to be out front sort of making sure that people are aware of that. And just to underline the importance of replacing those bridges, they're 90 years old now. They were built to accommodate 1 million trips a year. They now see 38 million trips a year, which is the equivalent of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Bridges now that are being built with a 50-year lifespan. So these bridges have to be replaced. I mean, we only need to look to Providence, Rhode Island, and the Washington Bridge down there. If there's another inspection, and there's a scheduled inspection on the Bourne Bridge in the fall, and they find a sheared bolt, you look at a potential complete closure of one of these bridges. Cape Cod Commission has just done an economic impact study that looks at that. And a major rehabilitation of the Bourne Bridge would require at least a 6-month complete closure. A structural issue may require a longer closure. Even the shortest closure of one of these bridges will cost us 1/3 of our economy and 1/3 of the jobs associated with that. And it would, in effect, shift to Sagamore 10,000 more trips on average a day than it's ever seen. So it can't happen. We've got to replace the bridges. And we've got to, as that replacement is happening, we've got to make sure that we continue to let people know that the Cape is open for business. So we can also use it for group incentives. So TIDs can be used to subsidize hotel stays, lowering rates that drive business during off-peak times. What Boston does now is in January, they give some of this money back to the hotels to provide $150 parking vouchers if you come and stay on the weekend. Just one of the examples of what is happening now. We've had some conversations, especially in places like Provincetown, where affordability has really been an issue up there, of maybe being able to subsidize hotel stays in May and to expand the season up there. So we can offer discounts to meeting planners, attracting new businesses and tax revenue. We can invest in sports marketing, tournaments, and multi-purpose facilities. We can provide restaurant credits to incentivize spending in local businesses, and we can drive international business recovery through strategic marketing. And just to highlight one of those, there's actually a special report that they did on tourism improvements and sports tourism. So TIDs are really the next frontier in funding destination marketing organizations and sports commissions. They provide dedicated funding to destination marketing organizations and sports commissions, alleviating the reliance on public funding. And these districts can promote tourism through DMO sports sales, direct grants, and events coordinators, and support for sports event infrastructure. So very important. That QR code might be dead, Mark, but I have a copy of the report with me. Yeah, and I'll leave it to you. It's a fairly short report, but it is very informative.
If you can leave that with us, that would be great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll do that. So what's the cost of doing nothing? Place-based promotion and marketing is significantly underfunded, as I've mentioned. This makes the Cape and our businesses less competitive with neighboring destinations. Other RTCs are in the process now, Metro West, Plymouth, north of Boston, Springfield, in creating these tourism districts. There are currently no resources to mitigate business impacts during the bridge construction or to have somebody out front with the public relations to let people know that we're open. And the occupancy and daily rates for traditional lodging will not be sustained at current levels without supplemental funding. And what we're seeing, it's a nationwide problem, but it is particularly acute on the Cape, is the competition of short-term rentals with traditional hotel lodging. And so we're losing traditional hotel lodging rooms on the Cape. And we currently have 19,000 short-term rentals, which is almost twice as much as Boston, more than New York City. And that's with over 1,100 added in the last 12 months to registration. So even though 37% of the houses on the Cape are second homes, and that's been fairly consistent over a period of time, the number of those that are now registering on platforms like Airbnb and VRBO has grown exponentially. So trying to balance some of that competition is going to require some additional resources to market traditional lodging. You've got a couple properties in town that have recently changed hands in the last 3 years. EOS now owns the Red Jacket and the Blue Water. They put $20 million into the Red Jacket Inn. If you haven't been there, it's pretty impressive, especially with the beachfront, and really would benefit and deserves to be marketed, especially off-season. Because I think one of the really important things here for the town is the ability to put people in these hotels in January, February, March, April, because of group events, could really stimulate your commercial tax base going forward. So that's sort of the overview of the district. I know it's been a long night for everyone. We're here to answer any questions that you might have. We'll leave the dedicated funding for sports tourism report with you. And Lisa, you have any?
I'm not sure if at this time of night would be the place for me to dig in and add. I think it was.
This is early for us.
Oh, is it? No,
we started at 8 this morning, and we got another meeting at 8 tomorrow. So,
all I would add is, first of all, under Paul's guidance, the concept of bridging, no pun intended, the public policy type issues we're facing also with economic development and growth on Cape Cod and how we support the inherent business economy here has been tremendous, I think, pulling it together. And this concept of a TDMD, having started as the treasurer of the foundation board and now being the chair, and watching the grant that we wait for from the state to come in to tell us how much we have in the budget to be able to spend across 15 towns and support initiatives across 15 towns is it's a raise your shoulders and shrug, we don't know. And our fiscal year starts in July, we find this out in January, and it changes year to year, and it becomes very difficult to budget. So understanding over a period of time the rolling increase that we would hope to achieve going through each of the 15 towns in the appropriate, with the appropriate number of hotels that would fit the room size that we're looking at, we begin to create a very nice pool of funds to really think strategically. I think about the parade coming up in Yarmouth and being able to market that in a different kind of way. It is the parade on the Cape for St. Patrick's Day. What does that sound like with additional marketing budget behind it to support people coming for the weekend and provide incentives or fun or something additional to bring to the market? So it's very exciting for me. I think it's very critical. I know I was going to pull Paul back. He started to get down the bridge route. That's a topic for another meeting, but also critically important, and not to be underestimated how very important it is to have a voice as Cape Cod about what people can and can't do trying to get here and not get here. And then the other hat I really wear as an employer of 180 people who work with business clients and consumers every day, and the criticality of continuing to leverage the hospitality industries that we have here, lodging, restaurants, entertainment, the service industries. We are a Cape of 8,000 businesses, probably 7,000 of which make less than $1 million a year in revenue. It's a small business economy that's supported through tourism, or that supports tourism, and the employees and the employment that's created to support the ever-struggling families that live here is really very important. So this additional funding arm for us would be very important.
Thank you. I'm going to start with Mark.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Paul, and thank you for being here and explaining to us how this concept works. First question, Paul, is when do you anticipate coming before us with the petition? What's the time frame?
We're ready to go.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have all the paperwork, so we could file tomorrow. But I wanted to reach out. I know it's a busy time. So I wanted to make sure that, our schedule didn't hamper your schedule.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to get a sense, and I appreciate you coming in here early so we can have a conversation about this beforehand. Initially, when this was proposed, I was a little bit concerned about how this might affect other things, and there are a range of concerns which I don't need to go over. However, I've spent a fair amount of time doing some research on this and spending time with Paul, asking a lot of questions. And, I've become increasingly convinced that something like this has a real value. You don't have to think about the bridges to understand the impacts of construction on local businesses. You can just drive down Route 28 in Yarmouth
Right.
any day of the week, all right? And we've all learned, I think, as a community, that you need to communicate with the residents that are visiting, and you need to communicate with your businesses. People need to know what's going on, how to get to hear from there. And we've been having this fairly intense discussion here on this board and in our community and in separate meetings with the business community about how to deal with this. It's a problem that can't be underestimated, and I'm glad that you flagged it for the bridges, but we actually have a bigger problem, and that is our goal is to have a fairly robust pace of wastewater construction that will last probably well into the same period that the bridges are going. And if you look at what the state's giving us and giving you principally for marketing dollars and what I would call tourist information dollars, because that's a lot of we're going to need to do, it just doesn't come anywhere close to what we need. So there's a bucket of money that we need and you need, and we have our own tourism promotion fund, which I know you're well aware of. There just isn't enough money. So I think this is an important first step in helping us do a better job in communicating to the larger constituents, tourists, visitors. And we're going to be so hard-pressed. I don't want to get into a political discussion, but, we just launched a trade war with Canada. The Canadians are basically advertising that they are not coming to the United States.
We're getting the emails, yeah.
I've seen the ads, I've seen the messages. we have, you know, in the provinces, we have public officials saying they're not just going to do business with the United States. So this is a very serious problem. And if this trade war continues to play out, we're going to have the same problem in Europe, and we're going to have the same problem in other parts of the world. So we are, as they say sometimes, we're kind of on our own and having to figure out how we work through this challenge as well. The federal government doesn't provide money for international tourism and international tourism support. And as we all know, international tourism is a huge part of our market here. It's a very lucrative part of our market. You know, we've been spending a lot of time in Yarmouth talking about how do we get into cultural tourism, historic tourism, heritage tourism. How can we get into these areas where the international tourist market is really strong? So we've got a lot of uncertainty that we're dealing with here. So I've become convinced that something like this is necessary. Now, I've been on this Mass DOT Bridge Advisory Committee recently, and, you know, I've asked the question of Mass DOT, how much money are they going to set aside to help us deal with this stuff? And that's not part of the program. So, like I said, we're on our own. We have to figure this out. So I think this has real merit. It has real value. And, you know, I appreciate, you know, you giving me a lot of time because, like I said, I was a little bit skeptical at first, but you've answered a lot of my questions, and based on at least a lot of the homework that I've done, I've come to recognize that this has real value. And the most important thing is the businesses that are paying have all agreed to do it. So we're not using taxpayer money. We're not taking money from the public coffers. We're basically consenting to allow 12 hotels in the town of Yarmouth to put forward their dollars and their resources to allow them to be presented to the state, given to the state, or handed over to the state or taxed by the state, however that mechanism works. But essentially, we're just saying it's okay, and we would be agreeing with them. But there's nothing else, there's no other burden to us. So.
Yeah, no, the main purpose and the need for the town vote is really to create the jurisdiction so that the Department of Revenue can be the entity that collects the assessment.
Right.
But your point, Mark, about self-sufficiency is something that we've talked about at the executive committee and with our entire board. We are living in an age of diminishing, you know, government revenue investment in the businesses that we thrive on, that we live on here. So whether it's having businesses pay more non-tax revenue, non-general fund revenue to promote themselves, or building facilities, event facilities, to bring more people here on the off-season where we don't have to build bigger roads, we don't have to build bigger wastewater systems. You know, we really have a unique opportunity as a region to be much more self-sufficient than we are now. And I think this is the first step in that direction. It's also about collaboration, coordination, working with partners. I mean, the Yarmouth Chamber has been a great partner to work with. And so, I mean, we used to run a visitor center that was like a quarter mile down from where the Yarmouth Visitor Center is. That didn't make any sense to me. So instead, we give the Yarmouth Chamber $25,000 to run one. You know, and that's, you know, was one of the first partnerships that I did when I got here. It made sense. And the Yarmouth Chamber will benefit from this the creation of this district as well. And we would be able to use some of the funds to publicize road work that crosses in front of the 12 hotels that are subject to this as well. So, you know, there's a tremendous amount of synergy. I like the town-by-town approach better than the Cape-wide approach. Quite frankly, it's easier to sort of dovetail the spending with the town's initiatives that way. So we're very excited about this, and I don't think it could have a bigger impact in any town than Yarmouth.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Tracy?
Well, thank you both for coming and making this presentation. We have to always get creative. I'm never a fan of taxing, but my only concern, and like Mark, we had the ability to speak about some of these things, is that number max, right? That collectively everything adds up to. And as you know, we're in the middle of trying to find funding for wastewater and our future wastewater funding, and they had allowed some ability for us to do some raising for the rooms tax. I'm very proud of the tourism revenue fund that we have. That was an agreement many years ago that we worked out with our business community to give back to them, and it's worked out very well. I love the fact that these are businesses that want to participate. My only concern is if we add this and then we find the need in the future to have to add another percentage. I mean, I never want to do it all in the tourism, but we do have to remember that our infrastructure has to be built for the peak, right? So to some extent, these rooms are playing into the need for the size of the infrastructure that we have to build. But, you know, so we have all those percentages now, and if we had to get another percent for wastewater and the rooms tax in the future, and then we have this, you know, where does that leave us? Where's the amount where people are going to travel elsewhere? So I don't want to. 20%.
Yeah, 20% nationally is where you start to run into issues where people make other choices. And I think with this would be around 16%.
16, so we have a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, and the other issue I just would raise is that part of what puts us at a disadvantage is the 2.75% that's put on traditional lodging and short-term rentals for the Water Pollution Fund. You know, that gives a 25% reimbursement for wastewater projects, which is an important thing to do. It's something the Chamber was very much in favor of. But, you know, the business model of a hotel versus a short-term rental is very different. Hotels hire a lot of people. They're subject to local regulations. Short-term rentals are not. And for the most part, they do not contribute as much to the nitrogen problem as single-family homes in neighborhoods do that are being used as short-term rentals. So from the hotel's perspective, they're willing, you know, they're paying it. They're moving forward. I think what they want to do here is if we can start to generate more business, more off-season business, and we can bring the commercial tax rate up as well as increase the contributions to the Water Pollution Fund. So there are two ways to get more money in the fund and to get more money locally for wastewater. One is to tax, the other is to grow the business. And so we really view this as that kind of investment in the business.
Well, and the other thing that you said, one of the things that you can utilize it for is to attract new business, and that, for our economic development, is something that we're really going to need to do. And, you know, when you talk about the reuse of Matakees and the potential, and I know that they're talking about tons of things, but, you know, potential for the sports, a sports complex in combination with these hotels, I mean, it's a win-win on that, you know, on that front. So, you know, I would never, you've got the people who want to pay it. I mean, that's an amazing thing because they see the benefit in it. Yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Joyce?
Oh, well, thank you for all this work. I'm very much in favor of anything that gives Cape Cod residents more financial stability and security. I mean, anything that would increase the year-round employment and the full-time with benefits kind of jobs that I'd love to see them have. So I look forward to hearing more about this.
Thank you.
Liz?
So you were saying, Paul, that the Yarmouth Chamber is on board, enthusiastic. They would get a cut, I guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
You could put it that way.
And when you say we'd have to have a public hearing, we're assuming we would add this to town meeting? Is that?
No, it doesn't require
no.
town meeting. It only requires a select board vote.
Oh, okay.
Pursuant to legislation.
Gotcha. And when you say you could use the money for housing initiatives for workforce, are you talking about creating workforce housing, or how would that money be utilized?
It's unlimited how we could use it. It's really only limited by the amount that we have. You know, it's because, the amount of money. So, I mean, probably not enough to create housing.
Well,
but
to add to a fund.
Add to a fund to manage, you know, some of the seasonal housing, subsidized housing, workforce housing. I mean, there are a lot of different ways that I think we can be helpful there.
Okay. And then the last question I had, who decided on the 1.5%? Was it?
It was the TDMD Preformation Committee, so it was actually the hotels itself. And this is we're asking businesses to charge more. And so
They balked.
they're the ones that had to make the choice. But if they're willing to do it, I
Yeah.
think they understand why.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's, should be supported.
I think it's a wonderful plan. I really don't see a downside for us in it. So let me just ask you, timing. You said you've already have all of your signatures,
Petitions.
basically, for the petition. So when are you looking for being able to take it to the town clerk?
Well, we would like to file as soon as possible because we can only start to collect on a quarterly basis. So there would have to be the public hearing and a vote, and then there's 30 days to forward those results to the DOR. So we're pretty close to being able, if we were to move forward now, to be able to start collecting on July 1st. If we get pushed out 30 days, we'll probably miss that and wouldn't start collecting till October 1st. So that's the only factor from our perspective, but very respectful of town's process and what a busy time of year it is.
Okay, so what would be the drop-dead date for us to have to approve it for you to be able to make your deadline of July 1st?
60 days.
It's probably 90 days.
90 days from now.
Yeah, so 90 days back
90
from
days
July 1st.
before July.
Right.
Yeah, so June, May, April. Yeah, so
I think, Madam Chair, if we could take this up right after town meeting, I think that would be great.
Okay.
That would be convenient for us.
So
if
we
that
were to,
works for you.
yeah, if we were to
It
file,
would be like May 1st.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah, I think that probably works.
okay,
And we're certainly willing to work with you on that.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'd
for
like to
listening.
work with you, too.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate your staying for the late hour.
Oh, I love it. It's like the good old
Make
days.
dinner.
Chair, having flashbacks, Paul?
Several of them.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on the agenda, we have,
I just want to say one other thing. Lisa, I just want to congratulate you on your upcoming retirement that you've announced, and you've been a real rock star to the Cape and to the industry. So, thank you.
Thank you, wasn't expecting that. I won't go far. Already trying to rope me in. And I said to him, the salary's gonna have to go up, Paul. The unpaid role. I
Nothing
told
from
him.
nothing leaves nothing, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
our next item on the agenda is the discussion and vote regarding the HERO Act for the warrant article. Bob?
Sure. Okay, we had the discussion from the last meeting. Obviously, the new legislation that was passed this year has several components related to the veterans exemption on property taxes, which is currently 400,000, no, 400 and 1,000, and let's see, the total cost of the exemptions currently is 150,000, and the legislation has a couple of provisions. One, the town could adopt a cost of living increase on those exemptions, which we estimate that would cost roughly $7,500 per year, or the town could increase that exemption up to 100%, which that would cost $150,000 per year, or the town could select a percentage that is lower than that with the minimum of 10%. And we had our assessors look into it. I know Jennifer has examined it as well. And I think, you know, the basic problem with this legislation is as it's been handed to the town, there's no funding source associated with it. So what happens is that total exemption, currently it's $150,000 a year, comes right out of Proposition 2.5. And, you know, we're fairly low-income community that is right up against its Proposition 2.5 limit. So that, this budget that we've had the public hearing on this evening, not only do we have 100% of that Prop 2.5 taken, we're having difficulty keeping our initiatives within that amount. Hence, the Proposition 2.5 override that's proposed in order to meet the public safety standards for staffing that we have in the community. So we're already sort of bursting at the seams with Prop 2.5. And last year we had, again, educational override. So, you know, we've had repeated issues with the Prop 2.5. So in order to fund an increase in that exemption, it's difficult immediately to accomplish because we don't have a ready available funding source where the budget is set. You know, we almost would need to, I mean, it competes directly with police, fire, education, services. So I think the recommendation that the finance director has made, I've indicated that I concur with that, is that where this legislation is so new, it may not be the greatest idea to jump in immediately and send this for approval beyond the cost of living increase at this point. I think we would need a little bit more time to do some financial planning on how exactly to fund it. And, you know, perhaps we could build it into next year's budget. And I would say even at the 100% level, I don't think that that's a wise thing to do to boost that up 150,000 in 1 year. Maybe we could try to do 25 or 50%, come up with, you know, a cost of either, you know, up to 75,000. But we would need to figure out how that works in the budget. You know, I am very mindful of some of the other departments that, you know, when you've gone through your meetings, you know, you've heard when you level fund me, that's like decreasing my budget. All of our major departments have basically said that. So it's a concept that I think we have a lot of support for, but the way it was crafted by the state as being another thing that comes under Prop 2.5, I just think that it's something that we need to grow into a little bit and study and figure out how best to implement it. So,
Mark?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion just to kind of move this along. So I'd like to move that the Board of Selectmen accept Clause 22I of the HERO Act for fiscal year 2026 and make 22J a priority for consideration for the FY27 budget.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
You have a unanimous on that one. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, moving on to the next item, we have our review of the draft annual town meeting. We also have within it a list showing the Board of Selectmen recommendations that we can make, so we can, as we've done, I think, in the past, kind of knock some of them off this week, and then hold whatever we feel needs further discussion for our next meeting on the 18th. If that's agreeable with everyone.
Sounds good.
Make a motion that we move and recommend Article 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Stop me if anybody has any issues.
No, you're on a roll.
11.
You're going well there.
12.
Can I pause for a second? And this is language, so maybe we approve them and I discuss this as a sidebar with town staff. It's just that the explanation for DY has some language.
Well, it has
that
to be
is not-
updated anyway, the whole, the article.
All of these
All
explanations.
of these are going to be updated.
Yeah,
further
it's the
refined.
gist.
Okay, good.
And the numbers, because of the vote last night, that will change our debt number,
Carry
so,
on.
but it's just the basic article.
Yeah.
Yeah, this document is constantly being revised and updated. Numbers are being adjusted
not- yeah,
based on
okay.
changes. Right. So keep that in mind. So if there's a revision somewhere or a suggestion, now's the time. And
Or later,
next-
not right now, but.
Yeah, not at this moment, but
Gotcha.
there's plenty of time.
Um,
So you were on 11, right?
Yeah, I actually don't have, I don't know, let me just look at the end, because I don't have an issue with any of these articles.
Nor do I.
Well, if you
So we
made a
can move
motion
we
to
can make a motion to move, place, no, we've already placed it, and recommend 1 through 34 with, with like the motion that Mark just made changes, obviously, that article. But I am not in opposition to any of these articles.
Sounds good to me. Do I have a second on that?
Yeah, with the modification. And I think we allow the CPA, the Community Preservation Committee, don't we usually allow them to move those articles? Tracy?
Yes, that's what they've done in recent.
So I would say make the move, at least,
We have to just recommend the CPA articles.
yeah. And that would be, the motion would be revised just to recommend the CPA articles.
Yep.
Okay.
So I second that.
Is the same thing true for finance?
No, they take their own vote.
They do their own.
In fact, their recommendations are already in.
Taken all but, like Richard said earlier today, they've got a few left.
He just has a few left.
You just get to kick back during town meeting.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimous.
Thank you.
Moving on. Board and committee actions, appointments.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
I would like to nominate Ellie Tierney as a regular member to the Conservation Commission. The appointment is for a 3-year unexpired term, which will run through June 2025. And I have a question about this. I feel like I'm nominating, but if I'm chair of appointments, I probably shouldn't be moving it.
No,
Is that right?
you should make a you should recommend the appointment, and then
Okay, I
somebody else. should.
recommend.
So moved.
So
Sec-
moved. Second.
Go. Get
All
that
in
figured out.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous.
And then I would also like to recommend Peter Malpass as a regular member to the Community Economic Development Committee. This appointment is for a 3-year unexpired term, which will run through July 2027.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and then we get to a more complicated thing here that's about special municipal employees. And I think Bob wants to just give a very, oh no, Mary wants to give a special.
You're welcome to take it.
He's waited all
They should be
night.
waiting all night for this.
It's quite all right. I don't mind.
Thank you.
Mary Maslowski, Town Clerk. So special municipal employee status is something that's provided for many of our part-time, unpaid, lightly paid employees. The conflict of interest law applies slightly differently to those employees if they have special municipal employee status. So for example, an attorney that might sit on a board that is designated as a special municipal employee could actually still represent before other boards and commissions at the town, and it wouldn't have that wouldn't be a conflict of interest. So in looking at some of your more recent appointments, 2 positions that don't appear on the existing list were the constable position and the municipal hearing officer position, both of which fall under the definition with being part-time, being either unpaid or paid less than what would be the equivalent of 20 weeks of full-time service to the town. So it seems to make sense that these 2 positions be designated as special municipal employee status. We reached out to town council, and as a result of that, they have provided 2 motions that are in the letter, the recommendation is that they are each done separately.
I move that the select board vote to designate the position of constable as special municipal employee position in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 1N.
Do I have a second? Okay. Any discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
I move that the select board vote to designate the position of municipal hearing officer as a special municipal employee position in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 268A, Section 1N.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Both passed and unanimous.
Thank you very much. We will update the list.
Thank you,
And
Mary.
As always, if questions come up on those, on other positions that you don't see or
there
newer
are-
boards that aren't included in this list, then just let us know and we can, through Bob, we'll vet it through
So
council.
you're the one that keeps track of all this information?
We do.
Great, thank you.
And I will say this, I found this list because
This list is outdated, though. There's been others in between the time before you started, and this list was.
So the only one we've done since I've been here was actually the Capital Budget Committee.
So I remember, I want to say it was.
That I know
Steve
of.
Young.
Because the Capital Budget Committee came out of a question with, I think, a planning board member also serving on the Capital Budget Committee
look
and
at the
the School
ZBA.
Building Committee.
You may have to look at the ZBA. I think at one point in time, we designated them.
ZBA is on here.
No, there was one after this since in my time here. Since I've been sitting here, we designated people. Maybe it was the Community Economic Development Committee because of Paul Tardif. It was one of them.
So if we can do some research and make sure that they get added to the list if that was done since I've been here, because
not there anymore,
that was
but-
one that I'm not aware of.
Yep.
I was involved with the Capital Budget Committee one, so I'm happy to make sure that if there are others, just let me know and we'll try and backtrack it through your minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mary.
All right, thank you very much.
Moving on to approval of the minutes. This is going to be a vote by necessity.
I move we approve the meeting minutes, March 12th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That's passed unanimous. All righty, moving on to our upcoming agenda review. We just talked about the fact that we'll be putting the Chamber of Commerce on our May 6th meeting. Is there anything else that needs to be discussed tonight?
No, but we might want to move the regional agreement off until he has the opportunity to look at that. I'd like to look at some other options for that. If he could, Dr. Smith could find ways to mitigate the peaks, that might be something we may want to wait to.
Yeah, good
see,
point.
and it's not going to happen before town meeting, I'm sure.
Okay, so let's
Drop
take
that.
that off the April 1st
Or put it back,
meeting.
yeah,
and
lower.
We'll move it out further.
We won't lose it.
Okay.
Don't lose it.
Promise.
We'll keep it pending. Okay. Moving on then to individual items. Any individual items, Mark?
Pass.
Tracy?
Well, the biggest item is the parade on Saturday that we should make sure that
Somebody
everybody.
was going to bring that up?
Yes. So,
So we discuss our outfits.
well, we're going to wear green, and we are all Irish in Yarmouth on Saturday, so.
I invite you to be, as somebody who happens to be 98% Irish, according to Ancestry.com, I'll allow you all to come on with me.
I'm Irish, so I can do it.
And we have the candy under lock and key.
There's got to be a lot of candy,
A lot
Bob.
of candy. We ran out again last year, Bob.
You can't get enough candy.
Can't get enough candy. Add whatever Mary Alice is getting, tell her to get more. The kids are waiting. Not only the kids, the adults. Okay, and walking in the parade will be Tracy
Yes?
and Joyce and Liz and myself.
I'll walk.
Bob.
I can walk.
And
Bob will be there.
I have to say that due to my infirmity, I will have to be riding in the parade.
Right.
And anyone is welcome to join me if they'd like to. But look at
We're
it, I could be
delighted,
the
though, that you'll
receptacle
ride.
of the candy for you, for one thing.
Should we add to our agenda list the position, taking a position on the lottery for the tech school? Writing a letter?
I think we should have a discussion about it first.
I think we should, yeah.
So that
let's-
should go on the
Agenda item,
bottom
Yeah.
Yeah.
of the agenda.
Yeah,
items list.
we can.
Yeah, and we should talk about it after we hear from Bob,
Right.
because they're going through a
Right.
process right now.
Well, it'll be on the bottom, so
Right.
it'll come up for a long time.
Okay, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Bob, you're up.
I do have an item I want to bring board members up to date on. I'm more than a little bit excited, having, been working with Bill and Karen Green in community development on our economic development initiatives. It's really, the timing on that is absolutely critical to begin to, we have the economic analysis of the market data for the Route 28 corridor. We have the mixed-use study, and we have some grant funding lined up. And obviously, the type of recruitment we've been doing for our economic development position is not really available immediately to help in that process. And we've developed a strategy to make more of a temporary provisional appointment of a much more experienced and seasoned economic development leader to come in and help us and to work with community development and Bill and get these studies off the ground in a real meaningful way and to begin to develop this data that we need as a community to, number one, to shape and articulate this economic development vision, and even more importantly, to inform the capital and the comprehensive planning process that we're doing right now, that without that, the economic development section of that is not going to be completed. And we've been doing some recruitment, and we feel that we found a candidate that is highly qualified and has a lot of skills and can help us move this forward so that by the end of this fiscal year that we're moved forward with that market analysis. And there's a lot of things we look forward to having this board, this select board, be critical stakeholders in the shaping of this economic vision, and I think with a little extra help, we're going to do that. So I wanted to bring that up with the board. We're working on putting the final touches on that right now, and hopefully have someone available by the middle of March to start, and that as soon as is practical, we'll be in front of the select board laying out a scope of services, and we do have all of this study information. Bill has just been doing yeoman's work, setting everything up for us. We just need right now, a little more work to help assist that along. And so I just wanted to let you know, it's a high priority that none of us have sort of let out of our mind for a minute, and we feel that now's the time to start to move this forward. And
So I just need to understand what you're saying. Instead of hiring an economic development person, you're going to use those funds to hire a consultant to work on a particular item?
yeah, it's less of a consultant and more of a temporary provisional appointment of someone that, it's not going to be full-time, but it's going to be actual time working in the town, coordinating these things. So not, there'll be coordinating consultants, but also all of us, the stakeholders, working with the chamber, working with the select board, bringing in the CEDC, and coming up with some vision items. So it's more of a, consider it, it's a temporary provisional appointment, and, someone that will be able to,
But the scope of work that they're going to be doing is the same as the position as if you would have hired somebody, or are you?
some of the duties. It's not going to be conducting ribbon cuttings for, say, for example, the new pizza place. We're still going to work with the chamber and stuff to do that, but it's going to be immediately, we have a detailed scope of services to coordinate the studies involved in the market analysis, the mixed-use analysis, a lot of that high-level study work.
Opposed to it. I think
Right.
it's a
No,
great
I'm
idea, because
trying to-
we need somebody to focus on it and move it forward, but we also need this other person too. So I'm hoping that we still continue to try to find a full-time person to
We're
do.
going to do that too, and so the vision is to get that full-time, and when we do, it's not likely to be someone as highly experienced and skilled as we need immediately to conduct all of this
I
market
mean, maybe you need
analysis?
to split the things and have taskmasters, right? So, I mean, it sounds like you got a lot on your plate. It would be great to achieve some of those short-term goals, but in the long term, I think having somebody here for the business community would also be beneficial.
And that's that's what we want to do. So that's right. This is a temporary thing to get the economic development vision going. We see it as kind of the foundation of the program, so that when someone comes in full-time, that they can have the benefit of the type of analysis, and that we can have the benefit of the vision, how it's going to look, what we see the economic development, and that would help, hopefully, sort of jumpstart when we get the full-time person here that's a permanent hire.
Yeah, the big problem, in my estimation, is the big problem that we have is, and it's not just Yarmouth, but hiring a full-time person for that pay in that position has been, and I think it will continue to be a challenge. We're just looking for a lot. And we were fortunate that Kyle Pandicini was with us, who came in probably at lower than what he was entitled to. And he was capable, but he came in here, he learned, he got talented, he was mentored by good people. And then what happened? He found a comparable job paying more at some other place. So I think this becomes something that, I think this is the only fix available, so I think it's great that you're doing this. But I think it's still, while we can work hard to try to find somebody to step in, I think it's just going to continue to be a challenge. So I think this is a perfect move. I think this is smart. I think,
if I may, as Bob said, it's really about setting the foundation for when the person does come in, they have a program and a plan. At the, full-time position salary, you're not going to find sort of the person who is gifted in some of the model running and numbers crunching that we would at this very strategic position. Once we get through that phase where we've got the documents and the understanding of what's moving next, we can bring somebody in to sort of operate it. That's really what this is all about.
Great. I think it's a wonderful plan.
Great idea.
So we'll be back in to talk to you about the scope and the process and everything, and don't give us too long of a leash.
All right, we'll yank it soon. Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you all very much for your patience and attention tonight.